Hey there everyone, and welcome to another video. It's good to see you all today. Today we will be taking a look at the life of the Macho Man Randy Savage, who was one of the most flamboyant wrestlers of the 70s and 80s. There was no heights that Randy couldn't reach. He was, as he said, too hot to handle and too cold to hold. One-time WWF Intercontinental Champion, he won the WWF World Heavyweight Championship twice. In 1987, he was crowned King of the Ring. In 2015, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame as part of the class of 2015. He received recognition from the Wrestling Observer newsletter. His match against Ricky Steamboat at WrestleMania 3 in 1987 was named Match of the Year. In 1992, he was awarded the title of Most Improved. Let's delve into the life and tragic ending to one of the biggest mega superstars of professional wrestling. I welcome you to the tragic tale of Randy Macho Man Savage. Randy Mario Poffo was born on November 15, 1952 in Columbus, Ohio. He was the firstborn child to Judy and Angelo Poffo, who also had another son, Lanny. Although wrestling wasn't his first choice of sport, as he was a tremendous baseball player in his teens, he was put to the minor leagues at 18 years old, where he played for the Gulf Coast League Cardinals. It was said that he had to retrain to play left-handed when he got injured in his right-hand side throwing shoulder after a collision at the home plate. He would continue to play in the minor leagues until 1974, when he played his last season. By the time he finished up, he had 16 home runs under his belt with 289 games over 4 years. It wouldn't be long before he was introduced to the world of wrestling and give up altogether on the field of baseball, as it was during his off-season in baseball in 1973 that he broke into the wrestling business. Wrestling under the name of the Spider, but later took the name Randy Savage, after only Anderson said he wrestled like a savage. Randy decided then to end his stalled baseball career and join his brother, Lanny, and father Angelo Poffo, who was a well-known wrestler from the 50s and 60s. His first match was against Golden Boy Paul Christie, but generally wrestled with his father and brother. In 1977, Angelo started his own promotion called ICW, or International Championship Wrestling. He started this promotion because he felt his two sons weren't getting the push he felt they deserved. The Mid-American States promotion ran from 1978 to 1984. Randy would join Jerry the King Lawler's promotion in Memphis with his brother Lanny for a stint while he honed his craft while feuding with Jerry the King Lawler over the AWA Southern Heavyweight Championship. Randy would also team up with brother Lanny against the likes of the Rock and Roll Express. Early in 1985, Randy would begin this feud again with the King over the title once again before having a loser leaves town match. On June 7, 1985, Randy lost this match, meaning he would have to leave town. This then allowed him to join Vince McMahon's WWF in 1985, where he would begin his most notable run. In July of that year, he would have his debut against Aldo Marinaro on the July 6th episode of Championship Wrestling. He would be billed as the top free agent in the country on his first appearance on Tuesday Night Titans, which featured several heel managers, including Mr. Fuji and Bobby the Brain Heenan, Classy Freddie Blassie, and Johnny Valiant, all of whom were all offering their services to Savage. But after several appearances and many offers, he eventually chose Miss Elizabeth to be his new manager. On the August 24th episode of Championship Wrestling, he was given the gimmick of a crazed, egotistical bully, where he would mistreat Miss Elizabeth constantly, and God help anyone who looked at her. Randy would have his first pay-per-view at the Wrestling Classic on November 7th, the promotion's second ever pay-per-view after WrestleMania. In his 16-man tournament, he would make it to the final after defeating Ivan Putski, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, and the Dynamite Kid, before finally being defeated himself by the Junkyard Dog. Later that year, he would begin a feud with the then Intercontinental Champion Tito Santana, where he would win via countout, meaning Santana would keep the belt, as you could only win by pinfall or submission. On an episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, Savage would win the Intercontinental Championship at the Boston Garden from Santana when he used a foreign object to nail him in the head. As Santana tried to lift Savage back into the ring from outside because the ref never saw it, he got the win and giving him his first WWF Championship title. Around this time, George the Animal Steel would take a rather unsettling fancy to Miss Elizabeth at a Saturday night main event show, causing Savage to go crazy with jealousy. This would continue all the way to a WrestleMania 2 match with Steel on April 7th, 1986, where Savage would defeat Steel in an Intercontinental Championship match. He would later have 2 more championship matches against Steel, winning both and retaining the title. His next feud would be with one of the company's top babyfaces, Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, when Savage would crush Steamboat's throat against a guardrail in October, causing him to be out for some time before returning in time for WrestleMania in March 1987. This was a well-detailed match by a man who liked to pay attention to detail. There was 19 near falls before Savage eventually lost the match to Steamboat, which ended in Steamboat coming out on top and ending the near 14-month reign as Intercontinental Champion. This match at WrestleMania 3 was well laid out, and every detail was precise, just the way Savage liked it. This was around the same time Savage liked to experiment with different types of costumes that he used to get made by a designer from Florida called Michael Brown. Savage and Steamboat would continue to have a feud on the house shows, even competing in a steel cage. He would win the King of the Ring tournament in 1987, and despite the company pushing him as a heel, the majority of the fans just absolutely loved this man. So the WWF had no choice but to turn him babyface. This time, he would begin a feud with the Honky Tonk Man because Honky was declaring that he was the greatest Intercontinental Champion of all time. This would lead to a match for the title on October 3rd, 1980, episode of Saturday Night Main Event. Despite trying his best, he would lose this opportunity because of outside interference by the Hart Foundation. Although winning the match, Honky would keep the title during the beating by Honky, Bret Hart, and Jim Neidhart. Miss Elizabeth would run to the back for help, bringing out Hulk Hogan of all people to assist Savage. After clearing the ring, Hogan and Savage would shake hands and begin their run as the Mega Powers, cementing Savage as a babyface in the process. The Mega Powers would go on to have one of the most memorable tag teams in the history of wrestling, despite only actually being together for 1 year. Their first match together would be on a house show in Vancouver on November 1987, where they would team up with Hacksaw Jim Duggan in a 6-man match against Ravishing Rick Rude, Harley Race, and King Kong Bundy, where they would come out on top and win the match. They would then go on to have a dark match on January 5th, 1988, in Huntsville, Alabama, in a handicap match against Honky Tonk Man and the Hart Foundation, again picking up the win. They would again have another 6-man where Ricky the Dragon Steamboat would join them on February 8th, 1988, where they would again pick up the win against Honky Tonk Man and the Hart Foundation. This feud would continue into early 1988, having a 5-against-5 in the first ever annual Survivor Series, and a couple other matches getting into 1988. Savage would have a singles match against the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, on the March 12th, 1988 episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, where Savage would be counted out due to Andre the Giant, who was accompanying the $1 Million Man along with Virgil, slamming Randy into the corner post while the referee was incapacitated. When the ref came to, Savage was counted out. Hulk Hogan would be the one to rescue Savage from the trio, sparking the Mega Powers' first feud, after Hulk Hogan lost the title when he and Andre the Giant had a match on February 5th, a 1988 episode of Saturday Night Main Event due to Ted's buying off the referee, Dave Hebner's twin brother Earl. Earl would pose as Dave and making a very fast 3 count on Hogan. After winning Hogan's belt, Andre would immediately hand it over to the $1 Million Man where he would declare himself the champion. The WWF president Jack Tunney was having none of it though, and instead of handing the title back to Hogan, he would declare that there would be a 14-man tournament at WrestleMania 4 to crown a new champion. Tunney would give Hogan and Andre a bye into the second round, but everyone else would have to start at round 1. Savage would get to the final round after going up against the Natural Butch Reed in the first, Greg the Hammer Valentine in the second, and the One Man Gang in the third, making it all the way to his 4th match of the night. He would go up against none other than the $1 Million Man. Andre kept annoying Savage from the outside and not letting him concentrate on the task at hand, so Miss Elizabeth ran backstage to get Hogan's help. Hulk eventually come out and quickly even up the odds, and as soon as the ref's back was turned, he crept into the ring and struck Ted in the back with a chair, leaving him a crumpled mess in the middle of the ring. Savage quickly realized what had happened, so he got up onto the top rope to give his signature flying elbow, pinning the $1 Million Man for the 3 count and becoming the undisputed World Heavyweight Champion. Over the next year, he would defend the title against the likes of Big Boss Man, One Man Gang, and even Andre the Giant, where he would successfully retain on each occasion. At the same time, Savage and Hogan would still be feuding with the Megabucks team of Ted and Andre, where they would eventually defeat on the new pay-per-view called SummerSlam. Jesse Ventura would be the special guest referee for this one, and he was on the side of the heel team, the Megabucks. This was the occasion when the Megapowers would bring a special weapon to ringside, but it wasn't known what that was. Near the end of the match, Miss Elizabeth got up onto the apron and whisked away her skirt to reveal nothing but a skimpy red pair of panties. The heels were stunned by this, and this allowed Hogan to get back in the ring and pin Ted as Savage pushed Jesse Ventura to the mat and made him make the pin. Once that feud was over, the Mega Powers began a feud with the Twin Towers, consisting of the Big Boss Man and Akeem, who was the former one-man gang. This feud ran all the way to the second annual Survivor Series. On November 24th, 1988, they had a 5-on-5 match, with the Mega Powers finally being victorious. This was the start of the jealousy creeping in, as Savage thought Hogan was showing too much attention towards Miss Elizabeth. This was frustrating Savage, but he kept his cool for now. It didn't help when Miss Elizabeth started managing Hogan as well, and when Savage was accidentally eliminated by Hogan in the January 15th, 1989 pay-per-view The Royal Rumble. The last match that the Mega Powers were in was on February 3rd, 1989, episode of the main event, where they faced the Twin Towers again. At one point in the match, Miss Elizabeth got injured as Savage hit her when he was thrown over the top rope to the floor. While Hogan lifted Miss Elizabeth and carried her in his arms, he left Savage to take a beating until Hogan got back to the ring. Savage was so furious that he slapped Hogan when Hogan tried to make a tag. Backstage, Savage attacked Hogan with the championship title, accusing him of lusting after Miss Elizabeth. Brutus the Barber Beefcake tried to intervene and protect his friend before security ran in to separate everyone. This was a definite heel turn for Savage before the April 2nd, 1989 pay-per-view WrestleMania 5. Savage would drop the belt to Hogan at the event, ending his 371-day reign with the championship. This match was spectacular, and even though Savage was actually injured at the time. Also, this was the end of the Macho Man gimmick. Now Randy would get more lavish dress sense to go along with the Macho King Randy Savage. Hulk Hogan had just defeated Randy to end his 371-day reign as the WWF World Heavyweight Champion. After they had a big falling out over Savage's jealousy concerning Hogan and Miss Elizabeth at the end of April, Savage replaced his manager with former WWF Women's Champion, Sensational Sherri. Randy would team up with the unstoppable human wrecking machine Zeus for a main event at the August 28, 1989 SummerSlam event. They would be up against Hogan and Beefcake, but lost when Hogan hit Zeus with Sherri's loaded purse before body slamming Zeus and dropping the big leg on him and pinning him for the 3. Savage and Zeus would demand a rematch, which Hogan and Beefcake accepted, but with one stipulation that they were inside a steel cage. Hogan and Beefcake would again get the win on the December 27th, 1989, no-holds-barred event. In September 1989, King Duggan would lose and drop the moniker King to Savage, where he would carry the gimmick with all the flamboyance that we all knew him for. Around this time, he and Hogan would have one more match to end their one-year feud, where Hogan would put his title on the line at the main event. On February 23, 1990, Buster Douglas would be the special guest referee, where he'd done a fast count on Savage. This infuriated Savage, so he danced around the ring and then slapped the newly crowned heavyweight boxing champion of the world in the face. Douglas would proceed to punch Randy in the face and flooring him, getting a massive pop from the crowd. After he finished with Hogan, Savage would move on to have a feud with Dusty Rhodes, where they would have a mixed match, where Savage would have his new manager, Sherri, and Dusty would have his new partner, Sapphire, at WrestleMania 6 on April 1st, 1990. Rhodes and Sapphire would win this match, but Randy would get his revenge with a win at SummerSlam. To end the feud, Savage would go on to have a feud with the Ultimate Warrior, who had just beaten Hulk Hogan clean in the middle of the ring for his heavyweight championship title. Warrior was refusing to have a match with Savage for the title, providing he was still the champion, after the Warrior defended it to Sergeant Slaughter, even though Sergeant Slaughter promised to give Savage a shot if he was to win against the Ultimate Warrior. It's a bit messy, this one, but still entertaining as hell. Before the Warrior v Slaughter match, Savage sent Sherri out to talk to the Warrior before he was set to face Slaughter. She intended to use sexual lure to persuade Warrior to change his mind, but this did not work, and it infuriated Savage. He was so mad at this point that he waited until the Warrior v Slaughter match had started and went out and smashed his scepter over Warrior's head, causing the glass head of the scepter to smash everywhere, which allowed Slaughter to take the win, crowning him champion in the process. Warrior would finally get his hands on Savage when they both put their wrestling careers on the line at WrestleMania 7 on March 24th, 1991. Savage lost this match, which was one of his greatest ever matches he ever had, meaning he would have to retire. This caused Sherri to lose her mind, and she started beating on him until Miss Elizabeth, who was in the crowd watching, came to the rescue. She managed to run Sherry off, leading to Savage reuniting with Miss Elizabeth. This got a massive response from the crowd, turning Randy back into a babyface for the first time in nearly 3 years, even though he was now in retirement. The story would continue as Randy and Miss Elizabeth would be in SummerSlam in August of 1991, as they were to get married. It was dubbed as the match made in heaven to go along with the match at Savage, knocking him clean out with the urn to the side of the head. Jake, the snake, was also there, threatening Miss Elizabeth with the snake that he pulled from the box. Sid Justice ran them off as he came to the rescue. Because Savage was retired, he couldn't do anything about it. So he began a public campaign to get himself reinstated as an active wrestler so he can get revenge on Jake. However, President Jack Tunney declined the request. During the filming of an episode of WWF Superstars of Wrestling on November 23rd, Roberts delivered a promo in the ring to provoke Savage. Once Savage was enticed into the ring, Roberts launched an attack, ultimately restraining Savage with the ropes and then exposing him to a live King Cobra, which bit his arm. According to Hulk Hogan and Jake Roberts on the Pick Your Poison DVD, the snake had a firm grip with its fangs and it was challenging for Jake to remove it from Randy. With support from the fans, Tunney later reinstated Savage and announced a match between Savage and Roberts for this Tuesday in Texas on December 3rd. Savage emerged victorious in that match, but afterwards, Roberts executed the DDT on Savage 3 times, leading to a climactic moment when Roberts slapped Miss Elizabeth. The feud persisted throughout the winter and concluded with a match on the February 8, 1992 episode of Saturday Night's Main Event, which Savage won. Savage then initiated a public rivalry with the champion Ric Flair, alleging that Flair had been involved with Savage's wife, Miss Elizabeth, in the past. Flair went so far as to provide photographic evidence of his alleged relationship with Elizabeth. The culmination of this feud came on April 5th at WrestleMania 8, where Savage emerged victorious, claiming his second heavyweight championship title. However, the animosity between Savage and Flair persisted, with WWF magazine publishing manipulated photos that appeared to show Savage and Elizabeth together, similar to the ones featuring Elizabeth and Flair. Eventually, it was revealed that Flair had tampered with the pictures. The former couple officially divorced on September 18th, with an announcement appearing in WWF magazine around the same time, which was a rare instance of breaking kayfabe for the WWF at that time. Throughout most of 1992, Savage and his longtime rival, The Ultimate Warrior, who had made a return to the WWF at WrestleMania 8, coexisted peacefully. However, tensions resurfaced when it was announced that Warrior would be the new #1 contender for Savage's championship. Prior to their match, they had several intense exchanges. On August 31st at SummerSlam, Savage defended his title against The Ultimate Warrior. Although Savage lost the match by count-out due to an injury caused by Flair and Mr. Perfect, he managed to retain the championship. Following the match, Warrior assisted the badly injured Savage backstage. On the September 14th episode of Primetime Wrestling, which was taped on September 1st, Savage lost the WWF Championship to Flair with interference from Razor Ramon. After losing his title, Savage teamed up with Warrior under the name Ultimate Maniacs. Despite being injured, Savage supported Warrior in his quest to dethrone Flair. They faced Money Incorporated, Ted DiBiase, and Erwin Arsheister for the Tag Team Championship on the November 8, 1992 episode of Saturday Night's Main Event. Although Money Incorporated retained their titles due to a countout, Savage and Warrior were set to take on Flair and Ramon at Survivor Series on November 25th. However, Warrior was fired from the WWF before the event, prompting Savage to choose Mr. Perfect, Flair's executive consultant, as his new partner. Initially dismissing the idea, Perfect was provoked by Bobby Heenan's insinuations that he could never wrestle at his previous level. In the end, Savage and Perfect defeated Flair and Ramon via disqualification. When Monday Night Raw debuted in January 1993, Savage primarily took on the role of a color commentator. At the Royal Rumble on January 24th, he finished as the runner-up in the match, being eliminated by Yokozuna. Returning to pay-per-view on November 24th at Survivor Series, Savage substituted for Mr. Perfect. He also competed in the 1994 Royal Rumble on January 22nd, but was eliminated by Crush, which led to a Falls Count Anywhere match on March 20th at WrestleMania 10. In this match, Savage emerged victorious over Crush. At this time, Savage was very unhappy working for the company, as Vince McMahon was sure Randy had wrestled his best matches. He was basically putting him out to pasture. Randy was having none of it. Randy was truly unhappy and felt he was being pushed down the card, and Randy believed he was better than wrestling Crush. Additionally, Savage made occasional appearances in Jim Cornette's Smoky Mountain Wrestling promotion in May, and made his final pay-per-view appearance on August 29th at SummerSlam, where he served as the Master of Ceremonies. Savage's last match for the WWF took place during a tour in Germany on September 13th, 1994, where he teamed up with Bret Hart to defeat Owen Hart and Jim the Anvil in Rostock. As October 1994 came to a close, Savage's WWF contract expired, prompting him to sign with their rival promotion, World Championship Wrestling. This is the last leg of Randy Savage's career. Still, he had loads of juice still in the tank. Who better to start off with? Yep, you guessed it, Hulk freaking Hogan. The Mega Powers reunion 1994 to 1995 occurred when Savage made his debut for WCW on the December 3rd, 1994 episode of Saturday Night. During this appearance, he mentioned the complex love/hate dynamic between him and Hulk Hogan, and expressed his aspiration to become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. At Starrcade on December 27th, Savage came to Hogan's aid, saving him from an assault by the Three Faces of Fear. The two legendary wrestlers then shook hands, reaffirming their friendship and rivalry. Another notable victory came at Super Brawl on February 19th, 1995, where Savage and Sting triumphed over Avalanche and Big Papa Rogers. However, things took a turn at Uncensored on March 19th, as Savage faced Avalanche and won the match through disqualification when a disguised fan, who was later revealed to be Ric Flair, attacked him. This incident ignited a bitter feud between Savage and Flair. The animosity escalated further on May 21st at Slamboree when Flair targeted Savage's father, Angelo Poffo, following the main event where Savage and Hogan defeated Flair and Vader. Savage took part in the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship tournament, emerging victorious against The Butcher in the initial round and stunning Steve Austin in the quarterfinals. He then intervened in Flair's match against Alex Wright, assaulting Flair and causing Wright to be disqualified. This led to a tournament semifinal where the winner would face the victor of the Sting and Meng match for the title at the Great American Bash. However, Savage and Flair's semifinal match never occurred due to their backstage brawl prior to the match, resulting in both of them being eliminated from the tournament. On June 18th, at the event, Savage was defeated by Flair. After Flair took Angelo's cane and struck Savage with it, they had a rematch on July 16th at Bash at the Beach, where Savage emerged victorious against Flair in a lifeguard lumberjack match. Later that year, during the storyline Where Aren't Anderson and Rick?, Flair turned on each other. Flair attempted to recruit Savage as his partner to face Anderson and Brian Pillman in a tag match. However, Savage declined the offer due to their past rivalry and Flair's previous attack on Savage's father. At Fall Brawl on September 17th in a War Games match, Savage, Hogan, Lex Luger, and Sting emerged victorious against the Dungeon of Doom consisting of the Ugandan Giant, the Zodiac, the Shark, and Ming at Halloween Havoc. On October 29th, Savage triumphed over Luger during World War III. On November 26th, Savage achieved his first WCW World Heavyweight Championship by emerging victorious in the inaugural 60-man 3-ring battle royal. However, on December 27th at Starrcade, he relinquished the title to Flair. Prior to that, Savage had triumphed over Hiroshi Tenzan earlier in the evening. On the January 22nd, 1996 episode of Nitro, Savage reclaimed the WCW World Heavyweight Championship from Flair for the second time. This period also saw Savage bringing Elizabeth back as his manager in WCW. At Super Brawl 6 on February 11th, Savage defended his title against Flair in a steel cage match, but ultimately lost it when Elizabeth betrayed him by allowing Flair to strike him with one of her high heel shoes. Flair alleged that Elizabeth had given him a significant portion of Savage's money from their divorce settlement, which he used to establish a VIP section at Nitro events. At Uncensored, on March 24th, Savage and Hogan emerged victorious in a Doomsday cage match against Flair and Anderson, the Barbarian Luger, the Taskmaster Z Gangsta, and the Ultimate Solution. During Slamboree, on May 19th, Savage and Flair joined forces for the Lord of the Ring tournament. They triumphed over Anderson and Eddie Guerrero, but were forced to forfeit to public enemies Johnny Grunge and Rocco Rock after Savage attacked Flair as payback for Flair's earlier assault. 96. The formation of the New World Order took place at Bash at the Beach on July 7th, when Hulk Hogan betrayed Savage, Sting, and Lex Luger to join forces with the Outsiders, comprised of former WWF wrestlers Kevin Nash and Scott Hall. Following their inception, Savage became one of the NWO's primary adversaries. For months, he clashed with Hogan and faced numerous attacks from the NWO. On September 15th, at Fall Brawl, the Giant defeated Savage, finally at Halloween Havoc. On October 27th, Savage had his long-awaited showdown with Hogan for the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. However, the Giant's interference led to Savage's defeat after being choke-slammed. Subsequently, Savage parted ways with WCW because he was unable to negotiate a new agreement with the company. Savage made his return to WCW on the January 20th, 1997 episode of Nitro, taking control of the show. He claimed to have been unfairly treated and refused to leave the ring until Sting appeared. Eventually, Sting showed up, and the two left together. In the following Nitro episodes, Savage and Sting were seen as free agents observing events from the crowd. At one point, WCW President Eric Bischoff, who was also a member of NWO, informed Savage that his WCW career was over, and he could only return as part of the NWO. On February 23rd, at Super Brawl 7, Savage shocked everyone by leaving Sting's side and joining the NWO. He aided Hogan in defeating Roddy Piper. The next night, Savage was reunited with Elizabeth, who had joined the NWO during his absence from WCW. Savage then began a feud with Diamond, Dallas, Page, and his wife Kimberly. On March 16th, at Uncensored, Savage emerged victorious in a triangle elimination match with the NWO. However, he suffered a loss to Page in a no disqualification match on April 6th at Spring Stampede. But on June 15th, at the Great American Bash, Savage managed to defeat Page in a Falls Count Anywhere match. In addition, Savage also participated in a tag team match at Bash at the Beach on July 13th. He faced a loss against the Giant at Road Wild on August 9th. Furthermore, on September 14th at Fall Brawl, Savage and Scott Hall were defeated by Page and Luger. Ultimately, their feud came to an end with a Las Vegas death match on October 26th at Halloween Havoc, which Savage emerged victorious from. On January 24th, 1998, Savage was defeated by Luger at Sold Out. Luger emerged victorious again in a rematch on February 22nd at Super Brawl. On March 15th, Savage faced Hogan in a steel cage match at Uncensored, which ended without a clear winner. After Hogan's unsuccessful attempt to regain the NWO title from Sting, it was Savage's turn to challenge for the championship on April 19th at Spring Stampede. Hogan, believing he was the only deserving member of the NWO to hold the WCW World Heavyweight Championship as the stable's leader, tried to prevent Savage from winning. Despite tearing his ACL in his knee during the match, Savage managed to defeat Sting with the assistance of Nash, securing his third WCW World Heavyweight Championship. The following night on Nitro, Hogan once again faced Savage for the title and appeared to have the match won, but for the second consecutive night, Nash intervened and powerbombed Hogan. However, Bret Hart interfered and attacked Savage, ensuring Hogan's victory. Subsequently, Savage joined forces with Nash and others to establish the NWO Wolfpack, breaking away from Hogan's faction. At the Slamboree event on May 17th, Savage was defeated by Hart through submission. On June 14th, at the Great American Bash, Savage joined forces with Piper and faced off against Hogan and Hart, but ultimately lost by submission. Defo gone downhill by this point. Following the match, Savage went on to wrestle Piper in the next bout, which resulted in a quick submission victory for Piper. After the Nitro event the following night, Savage took a break from the company to recover from multiple knee surgeries. He made only one more appearance in 1998, when he assisted Ric Flair in defeating Eric Bischoff for the WCW presidency. But you can tell for sure that Randy isn't enjoying his run of defeats. On the December 28th episode of Nitro, the night opened with heavy NWO involvement, and the Giant once again inserted himself into the show to protect Eric Bischoff's position. Once Savage stepped inside the ropes, he stood alongside the Giant as if he were there to reinforce the stable. But as soon as the Giant focused on the situation outside the ring, Savage struck without hesitation. He hit a sudden low blow that doubled the Giant over and followed it immediately with a hard clothesline that sent the massive NWO enforcer crashing out of the ring. Savage made a comeback with a fresh appearance and theme music. His first move was serving as the guest referee in the main event at Spring Stampede on April 11th, which Diamond Dallas Page won. Shortly after, Savage began interfering in DDP's matches to ensure that Page retained the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. However, when Kevin Nash won the title on May 9th at Slamboree, Savage set his sights on capturing the championship for himself. Around that time, Medusa and Miss Madness joined Savage as his other two valets, forming Team Madness. At the Great American Bash on June 13th, Sid Vicious returned to the WCW and assisted Savage in attacking Kevin Nash. This resulted in a tag team match taking place on July 11th at Bash at the Beach between Nash and Sting going up against Savage and Sid, with a stipulation that whoever scored the winning fall would become the WCW World Heavyweight Champion. Savage emerged victorious, capturing his fourth and final WCW World Heavyweight Championship by pinning Nash. However, Savage's reign as champion was short-lived as he lost the title the following night on Nitro to a returning Hollywood Hogan. Nash interfered in the match and delivered a powerbomb to Savage, mirroring the previous year's situation where Nash had attacked Hogan to aid Savage in retaining his title, albeit unsuccessfully. The dissolution of Team Madness began slowly as Medusa and Miss Madness started quarreling over who was to blame for Savage's title loss. Eventually, Savage fired both of them and embarked on a feud with Dennis Rodman triumphing over him at Road Wild on August 14th. Savage vanished from WCW programming after his clash with Rodman and went on to make 2 additional appearances. The first occurred on the October 25th, 1999 episode of Nitro, where he entered the ring alongside Gorgeous George and discussed passing the torch to the next generation. His second and final WCW West appearance took place on the May 3rd, 2000 episode of Thunder. There, Savage rejoined the Millionaires Club, a collective comprised of Hulk, Hogan, Ric Flair, and other seasoned wrestlers. He assisted them in the conclusion of a 41-man battle royal. Although Savage declared his intention to assist the veteran group in eliminating the young New Blood faction, he did not resurface in WCW before its eventual closure. The following year, on November 7th, 2004, Savage made a comeback to the world of professional wrestling during NWA's Total Nonstop Actions Victory Road's pay-per-view event. His return involved a confrontation with Jeff Jarrett. He then made his debut on Impact on November 19th, where he confronted the Kings of Wrestling, Jarrett, Kevin Nash, and Scott Hall. In the following week's show, Savage led a group attack on them. On December 5th, at Turning Point, Savage teamed up with Jeff Hardy and AJ Styles to defeat the Kings of Wrestling in what would be his final match. However, Savage left TNA on December 8th due to disagreements over the proposed finish of a main event for Jarrett's NWA World Heavyweight Championship at Final Resolution. On the morning of May 20th, 2011, Savage was driving his Jeep Wrangler near his residence in Seminole, Florida, with his spouse seated beside him when he lost consciousness and collided with a tree. Emergency medical personnel arrived promptly and discovered his lifeless body at the scene at the age of 58. Both Savage and his wife were wearing seatbelts. His wife sustained only minor physical injuries as a result of the accident. An autopsy conducted by the medical examiner's office revealed that he had an enlarged heart and advanced coronary artery disease, with his arteries being more than 90% narrowed, leading to a sudden heart attack. The substances detected in his system included a prescribed painkiller and a small amount of alcohol. Savage had never received treatment for any heart-related issues, and there was no evidence to suggest that he was aware of his heart condition. The official cause of death was recorded as atherosclerotic heart disease. Following his death, Savage's body was cremated 5 days later, and his ashes were interred beneath a cherished tree on his property in Largo, Florida, close to where his mother resided. Days prior to his passing, he had asked his brother to scatter the ashes of his beloved dog in the same location. Savage explained to his brother that the reason for wanting him to remember that specific spot was because he desired his ashes to be scattered there too. For years, one of the loudest and most persistent rumors about Randy Savage involved Stephanie McMahon, claiming there was some scandalous backstage relationship. Lanny Poffo, Savage's brother and closest family source, slammed that nonsense repeatedly, publicly denying it in interviews, podcasts, and media appearances. There is no evidence, no corroboration from anyone in wrestling, and no reason to believe it ever happened. The rumor survived because the internet loves a story, but the facts are clear. Savage's personal life was private. His marriage ended on personal terms, and his career was defined by his work in the ring, not wild gossip. Lanny's statements put the record straight, proving that some rumors are louder than the truth, but they will never overshadow the legacy of the Macho Man. Thanks for watching. Hello and welcome. Thanks for jumping in today as we dig into the life and career of the man who called himself the sexiest man alive, Ravishing Rick Rude. As a kid, I hated this guy. Rude was the perfect villain. He strutted around bragging about his body like he'd invented abs, and he leaned on Bobby, the brain Heenan, every time the competition got tough. I couldn't stand him, which means he was doing the job exactly right. Being great in the ring is one thing, but talking people into the building, building a whole identity just by opening your mouth? Most wrestlers crumble the second the microphone hits their hand. Rude didn't. He had the look, the presence, the delivery, and he knew exactly how to make a crowd hate him in under 10 seconds. And he loved every second of it. He's remembered most for that late 1980s WWE run, easily the peak of his career. As a proud member of the Heenan family, he turned pre-match insults into an art form. He'd grab the mic, tear into the audience, and make them furious before the bell even rang. After winning a match, Rude loved pulling one more stunt. He'd grab a young female fan from the crowd and plant a full dramatic kiss on her, just to prove he was every woman's favorite problem. It was cocky, ridiculous, and completely on brand for him. Looking back now, years later, I've got nothing but respect for him. The older I get, the more I understand how good he really was. Rude wrestled from 1982 until he retired in 1994 because of an injury, and he had one final match in 1997. That's a long run for somebody who spent his whole career getting hit in the head and smiling about it. The list of accomplishments is stacked. 4-time world champion, 3-time WCW International World Heavyweight Champion, 1-time WCW World Heavyweight Champion, 1-time WWF Intercontinental Heavyweight Champion, 1-time WCW United States Heavyweight Champion. Nothing handed to him, all earned. He also got real shots at the WWF World Heavyweight Championship and the NWA World Heavyweight Championship on pay-per-view. And yeah, he headlined SummerSlam 1990. That alone tells you how seriously the industry took him. After retiring from the ring, Rude shifted into managing other wrestlers. And he didn't just show up, he jumped straight into one of the hottest acts of the era, D-Generation X. On November 17, 1997, during the peak of the Monday Night Wars, he became the only person ever to appear on WWF Raw and WCW Monday Nitro on the exact same night. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2017, which was long overdue. Rude was born in St. Peter, Minnesota, to Richard Clyde Rude and Sally Jean Thompson. That's where the story starts. He studied at Robbinsdale High School in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, alongside Tom Zink, Brady Boone, Nikita Koloff, Kurt Hennig, John Nord, and Barry Darsow, all of whom would later pursue careers as wrestlers. He shared a particularly strong bond with his childhood companion, Kurt Hennig. After completing his studies in physical education at Enoch Ramsey Community College, Rude briefly worked as a bouncer before giving arm wrestling a try. It was during this time that he gained recognition in the world of professional wrestling. Rude received training as a wrestler from Eddie Sharkey, who was also responsible for training notable wrestling talents such as Bob Backlund, the Road Warriors, Shawn Michaels, Austin Aries, and Eric Rowan. In 1982, he entered the world of wrestling under the name Ricky Rude, working as a good guy jobber. His first appearance on television didn't go well, as he lost to Josh LeDuc on the November 6, 1982 episode of Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. After his time in Vancouver's NWA All-Star Wrestling, he went on to compete in Georgia Championship Wrestling, and then in the Continental Wrestling Association, based in Memphis. Rude made his first appearance on the May 28, 1983 episode of World Championship Wrestling, where he defeated Pat Rose using a dropkick. The following week, Rude was interviewed by Gordon Soley, during which he had talked about his transition from arm wrestling to professional wrestling, and how he had to lose weight in order to improve his speed. In 1984, Rude returned to Memphis with a new persona as Ravishing Rick Rude, a cocky and arrogant villain managed by Jimmy Hart. He engaged in feuds with Jerry Lawler and later his former tag team partner King Kong Bundy. Rude also had a match in WCCW against Kamala, which he unfortunately lost. He then moved on to Jim Crockett Promotions, an affiliate of the National Wrestling Alliance, where he teamed up with various partners to feud with the Road Warriors. Rude was brought on board by Championship Wrestling from Florida in December 1984, with Percy Pringle serving as his manager. On January 16, 1985, Rude beat Pez Whatley and took the NWA Florida Southern Heavyweight Championship. Clean, simple, and straight to the point, he walked in hungry and walked out with gold. The celebration didn't last long. He dropped the title to Brian Blair on April 10, 1985. Rude hated losing, and you could tell. The man wore frustration like it was part of his gear. But he wasn't staying down for anybody. On July 20th, 1985, he fought through the Southern title tournament, made the finals, and beat Mike Graham to take the belt right back. Rude treated the championship like a personal argument, and he wasn't letting anyone else have the last word. On April 16th, 1985, Rude teamed up with Jesse Barr to grab the NWA Florida United States Tag Team Championship. They were a powerhouse duo, facing off against Billy Jack Haynes and Wahoo McDaniel in brutal, high-stakes matches. In October 1985, Rude made his debut in World Class Championship Wrestling, stepping back into the ring alongside his manager, Percy Pringle. From the moment he arrived, he made it clear he wasn't there to make friends. He was there to dominate. He immediately dove into high-profile rivalries, targeting Kevin Von Erich and Chris Adams. Both were tough, respected, and ready to throw down, but Rude didn't care about reputations. Then things shifted. On February 20th, 1986, WCW split from the NWA and rebranded as the World Class Wrestling Association. The World Heavyweight Championship got a new name, the NWA American Championship. And Rude? He was still holding the belt, still standing tall, still proving he belonged at the top while the landscape around him changed. This made Rude the first world champion in the promotion. In July 1986, he lost the title to Chris Adams and subsequently dismissed Pringle as his manager for a brief period. He enlisted his sister, Raven, as his replacement manager. Rude formed a tag team with the Dingo Warrior, but their partnership was short-lived as the Warrior betrayed him and turned into a fan favorite. In September 1986, Rude made his return to Jim Crockett Promotions and teamed up with Manny Fernandez and their manager, Paul Jones, to feud with Wahoo McDaniel. Rude and Fernandez, collectively known as the Awesome Twosome, captured the NWA World Tag Team Championship on December 6, 1986, by defeating the Rock and Roll Express. This victory sparked a heated rivalry between the two teams, which only came to an end when Rude departed for the World Wrestling Federation in April 1987. I hope you're really enjoying the video so far. Let me ask you something. Do you think Rick Rude was a major player in professional wrestling, or was he just another pretty face? If you believe he was a big deal, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now. It's a simple click for you, but it tells me a lot about how many of you want more hardcore, no BS wrestling content like this. Every subscription tells me that I should keep digging into these stories, keep exposing the legends, the heat, and the chaos behind the curtain. So, if you're a true fan, show it. Now that I've got that off my chest, let's jump back into the madness and continue breaking down the life and career of ravishing Rick Rude. On July 15, 1987, Rude made his World Wrestling Federation debut as the newest member of the Bobby Heenan family on Superstars of Wrestling. Rude's first significant rivalry in the WWF ended on November 24th at Madison Square Garden, when he defeated Heenan's erstwhile muscle-bound charge, Mr. Wonderful Paul Orndorff, whom Heenan had dropped after Rude joined the family. On January 9th, 1988, Rude stepped into the Boston Garden to challenge Hulk Hogan for the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. He didn't win. He got his ass handed to him. But that loss, it lit the fuse for one of his most infamous feuds, Jake the Snake Roberts. Rude had a routine before every match that made fans hate him instantly. He'd strip off his robe, ripping on the crowd like it was a personal insult. He called them fat, out-of-shape sweat hogs from their own hometowns. And yeah, it probably was a jab at Austin Idol's disrobing shtick, but Rude made it his own. Every insult hit hard, every word stung, and the crowd didn't know whether to cheer, boo, or throw something at him. After each win, he would kiss a woman that Heenan had picked out of the crowd. Rude, specifically airbrushed tights, which he wore during matches, were one of his distinguishing features. Rude attempted to get Cheryl, who is Jake Roberts' real-life wife, involved in the Roberts angle, despite the fact that he was unaware of Roberts' marital status at the time of Heenan's selection. Rude got upset after Mrs. Roberts smacked him, and according to Jake, busted his eardrum after she rejected him and told him who she was coming to visit. When Roberts hurried out of the dressing room to attempt the rescue, Rude grabbed her wrist and scolded her over the microphone. Rude entered the ring wearing tights with a stencil of Cheryl's picture on the front. Black spot censoring Rude's genital area gave the impression that he was naked, but the live audience saw him undressed down to a G-string. An enraged Roberts charged the ring and stripped Rude. Rude wore an additional pair of tights underneath his ring tights until the middle of 1988, including during his match at the first SummerSlam versus the Junkyard Dog. Rude had climbed to the top turnbuckle and carried the JYD on his back. During the match, he removed his tights to show off a second pair that bore Cheryl Roberts' image. Roberts, who had witnessed the incident from the dressing room, attacked Rude when he struck the dog with a flying punch. Rude won because of Roberts' attack on him, disqualifying the JYD on October 24th at Madison Square Garden. Rude Awakening versus DDT ended in a loss to Roberts. Rude and Roberts' rivalry ended when Roberts pinned Rude in the 1988 Survivor Series after hitting Rude with a DDT. Rude's first subsequent major rivalry started in January 1989 at the Royal Rumble pay-per-view, where he and the Ultimate Warrior engaged in a super pose down that culminated with Rude striking Warrior with a metal posture bar. Rude defeated the Ultimate Warrior for the WWF Intercontinental Heavyweight Championship at WrestleMania 5 with Heenan's assistance. However, Rude lost the title to Warrior at SummerSlam of same year, mostly because of Rowdy Roddy Piper's meddling. Rude then feuded with Piper, resulting in a clash between their respective teams at the 1989 Survivor Series, in which both men brawled to a double count out. Rude would go on to have many matches with Piper, including one inside a steel cage on December 28th at Madison Square Garden, losing the bulk of them before briefly facing Jimmy Snuka and defeating him at WrestleMania 6. Rude restarted his feud with the Ultimate Warrior in the summer of 1990, when Warrior won the WWF World Heavyweight Championship. Rude began hard training in preparation for the Warrior, taking a more serious approach that included ignoring women and cutting his hair short. The feud culminated in a steel cage at SummerSlam 1990, wherein Rude was defeated by the Warrior. Next, he was set to quarrel with Big Boss Man, which began when Rude's manager, Bobby Heenan, began making disparaging remarks about Boss Man's mother. Rude was supposed to be on the Natural Disasters team at the Survivor Series, competing against Hulk Hogan and Boss Man's squad. But he was replaced by Haku after Jack Tunney had suspended him indefinitely. Tunney revealed that Rude's words about the Boss Man were the basis for his suspension, and that his manager, Bobby Heenan, was required to wrestle the Boss Man in his place. Rude actually left due to a disagreement with owner Vince McMahon. After leaving there, Rude tried to join Herb Abrams, UWF. Rude was still under contract with the WWF when his former company issued a cease and desist order, preventing him from appearing on UWF television. He did not wrestle again until May 18, 1991, when he competed in the Tri-State Wrestling Alliance's TWA Spring Spectacular 2 event in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He lost to Paul Orndorff via disqualification. 2 months later, he joined All Japan Pro Wrestling Summer Action Series 1991, making his debut on July 6, 1991, during a show in Yokosuka, Japan. In his first match on the tour, he and Johnny Ace defeated Billy Black and Joel Detton. Rude went undefeated in singles matches, defeating Isamu Teranishi and Akira too. His final appearance was on July 19th, when he teamed up with Johnny Ace to lose against Dan Spivey and Stan Hansen in a quiet match that marked the end of his run without any major attention from the locker room. Rude also competed in International World Class Championship Wrestling, where he faced off with the Honky Tonk Man. After a year of wrestling on select independent circuit shows, as well as a July 1991 tour for All Japan Pro Wrestling, Rude returned to WCW, which had previously been Jim Crockett Promotions, before being sold to Ted Turner in late 1988. He returned as the WCW Phantom at Halloween Havoc on October 27, 1991, and unmasked himself later that night. He led the Dangerous Alliance, which included himself, Paul, E. Dangerously, Medusa, Arn Anderson, Bobby Eaton, Larry Zbyszko, and Stunning Steve Austin. Rude defeated Sting for the United States Heavyweight Championship on November 19, 1991, and went on to have other high-profile feuds, including one with Ricky Steamboat. Rude and Medusa departed the Dangerous Alliance in 1992, sparking a conflict with Nikita Koloff. Rude challenged reigning World Heavyweight Champion Ron Simmons on multiple occasions, but was unable to win the belt. In December 1992, Rude sustained a serious neck injury and was forced to relinquish the United States Championship, therefore ending his reign of over 14 months. Rude returned alone in April 1993 and attempted to recapture the title from Dustin Rhodes after a 30-minute Iron Man encounter ended in a 1-1 draw. On July 18th, the two were due to face off in a best-of-3 series on Saturday night. Rude won the first encounter on August 28th, but fell to Rhodes twice on September 4th and 11th, ending his chances of regaining the United States Heavyweight Championship. Rude shifted his focus to the NWA World Heavyweight Championship, announcing his intentions on August 28, 1993, as a guest on then-champion Ric Flair's A Flair for the Gold talk show. In September 1993, Rude defeated Flair to win the title at Fall Brawl. WCW lost the rights to use the NWA World Heavyweight Championship once it withdrew from the NWA. They had a big decision to make, but they just opted to making their own title for the show. It's just a strap, after all, but very big decision was made to do it. They would name this title the WCW International World Heavyweight Belt, which Rude lost to Hiroshi Hayes on March 16, 1994 in Tokyo, Japan. Rude reclaimed the championship just 8 days later in Kyoto, Japan, after losing the title to Sting on April 17th at Spring Stampede. Rude pinned Sting on May 1st at Wrestling Dantaku in Fukuoka to become a 3-time champion. Rude, on the other hand, injured his back during the match when he landed on the corner of the raised platform surrounding the ring. After receiving a suicide dive at ringside, unable to wrestle, he was stripped of the title with the storyline excuse that he used the title belt as a weapon during the match. Rude retired shortly afterward. Rude collected on a Lloyd's of London insurance policy and did not wrestle again until January 1997, when he joined Extreme Championship Wrestling. As a masked man, Rude made his debut at House Party, claiming that his New Year's resolution was to fuck with the franchise Shane Douglas. Rude went on to harass Douglas, spanking his valet, Francine, during crossing the line again. He eventually unmasked and became a color commentator before briefly aligning himself with Douglas in his Triple Threat stable. Rude made a one-time comeback to the ring in the main event at ECW Heatwave, 1997, in a 6-man tag team match, teaming up with ECW mainstay Tommy Dreamer and the Sandman to face Jerry Lawler and ECW stars Rob Van Dam and Sabu, only to turn on Dreamer and the Sandman. Rude assisted Lawler in defeating Dreamer and the Sandman during the ECW versus USWA and WWF intercompany competition. Rude returned to the WWF on August 11, 1997, as the insurance policy of the group known as Degeneration X, which consisted of Shawn Michaels, Triple H, and Chyna. The term Degeneration X was first used on October 13, 1997. Rude never wrestled while a member of DX, although he was always ringside throughout the group's matches. Rude left a few days later following the Montreal Screwjob at Survivor Series. According to Bret Hart, Rude remained in the locker room during Bret's meeting with Vince McMahon following the bout in Montreal, and later called Eric Bischoff to inform him that what had happened was real. Rude was not contracted to a full-time contract with McMahon, and instead worked on a pay-per-appearance basis. Rude was able to reach an agreement with Bischoff and WCW, thanks in large part to his outrage at the Montreal Screwjob. Rude appeared on both WCW, Monday Nitro, and Raw is War with the WWF, because Raw was taped and he appeared on the live WCW event. On the same night in November 17, 1997, a mustached Rude went on Nitro, which was live, and began to criticize Vince McMahon, Shawn Michaels, DX, and the whole corrupt company, calling the organization the Titanic, a reference to Titan Sports, the parent corporation of the WWF at the time. Rude arrived an hour later on Raw is War, which had been taped 6 days earlier. With the full beard he had been sporting during his final weeks in the WWF, Rude also featured on ECW's Hardcore TV over the weekend. Rude continued to make ECW appearances while in Degeneration X since the WWF and ECW frequently collaborated. Rude joined the NWO and managed his pal Curt Hennig. Rude became the first wrestler to represent both DX and NWO. When the NWO split, Hennig and Rude initially supported the NWO Wolfpack in May 1998. However, their tenure with Red and Black was limited. At the Great American Bash, they attacked fellow Wolfpack member Conan after he lost to the undefeated Goldberg, prompting Hennig and Rude to join NWO Hollywood instead. Rude and Hennig were both forced to leave WCW in late 1998 due to injuries. Hennig had a leg injury and Rude was assumed to have testicular cancer, but it was subsequently discovered to be a spermatocyte. Hennig returned to the NWO following his injury at Starrcade, but Rude was still unable to appear and was not featured in the NWO reunion in January 1999. Rude officially left WCW in April 1999, and his last appearance was on the April 5th, 1999 episode of WCW Monday Nitro, Backstage Blast. Unfortunately, this would mark the end of Ravishing Rick Rude's career, as sadly, his wife would discover him unresponsive, and he died of heart failure on April 20th, 1999 at the age of 40, just weeks after his last television appearance. According to the autopsy report, he died from an overdose of mixed medications. Rude was preparing to return to the ring when he died. The effects of gamma-hydroxybutyrate, a narcolepsy preventive medicine, could have contributed to his death. Bret Hart has revealed that despite his womanizing Ravishing One reputation, Rude was a committed family man who never removed his wedding band before matches, instead covering it with tape during any wrestling match he had. Rick Rude's induction into the WWE Hall of Fame was announced on March 6, 2017. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat welcomed Rude. Michelle, Marissa, and Richard Jr. accepted on his behalf. Well, it's that time again where we have to say goodbye. I hope you enjoyed the tragic tale today, and hopefully you've learned something new along the way. If you did, then press the subscribe button to show your appreciation. I don't ask for much, and it's completely free to do, so you might as well hit it while you're here. If any of you out there want to hear about your favorite wrestler or a specific wrestling story you've always wondered about, drop a comment below and I'll dig into it for a future video. I always appreciate seeing what you all want to hear next. Thank you for watching, thank you for sticking around, and take care until the next one. Ricky the Dragon Steamboat, the one wrestler nobody hates, which already makes him unbearable. 30 years in professional wrestling and not a single credible enemy. No lawsuits, no fistfights, no shoot interviews where someone finally admits they couldn't stand the guy. That's not luck. That's psychological warfare. While everyone else was burning bridges, Steamboat was quietly building a career so clean it makes the rest of the business look guilty. No ego meltdowns, no backstage tantrums, no politics. Just elite matches that still make younger wrestlers nervous when the tape starts rolling. In a business defined by bad behavior, Ricky Steamboat didn't just survive, he exposed everyone else. Steamboat began his career in 1976, training under Vern Gagne. He debuted in the American Wrestling Association as Richard Blood, his real name. Soon after, he moved to Jim Crockett Promotions, adopting the name Ricky Steamboat. This debut kicked off a 30-year career that would see Steamboat become one of wrestling's most respected babyfaces. His technical skill, high-flying moves, and epic feuds with rivals like Ric Flair set new standards for wrestling greatness. Championship wrestling from Florida from 1976 to 1977 was crucial in shaping his early career. CWF, a key National Wrestling Alliance territory, helped Steamboat gain exposure and develop his persona. Initially wrestling as Richard Blood, Steamboat was renamed by CWF promoter Eddie Graham, who saw his resemblance to Sam Steamboat. This new identity, emphasizing martial arts and heroism, set the stage for Steamboat's future as a beloved babyface. Though he didn't win major titles in CWF, Steamboat gained valuable experience and built a fan base. This period was vital in honing his skills and developing his iconic dragon persona. After CWF, Steamboat joined Jim Crockett Promotions in 1977, a move that defined his legacy. His high-flying style, technical skill, and charisma quickly made him a fan favorite. At JCP, Steamboat began his legendary feud with Ric Flair, starting in 1977. Their rivalry became one of wrestling's most iconic feuds, showcasing masterful storytelling and athleticism. This feud elevated both wrestlers' careers, with Steamboat playing the virtuous hero to Flair's arrogant villain. Steamboat's JCP stint was pivotal. He quickly rose through the ranks and formed key rivalries, especially with Ric Flair. His time there also saw him winning multiple championships, including the NWA United States Heavyweight, NWA World Tag Team, and NWA Mid-Atlantic Heavyweight titles. After leaving JCP in 1985, Steamboat joined the WWF, cementing his legacy as a top babyface from 1985 to 1988. This period featured significant feuds and accomplishments. His initial WWF feud with Don Muraco and Mr. Fuji established Steamboat as a credible babyface. In 1986, he entered a high-profile rivalry with Jake the Snake Roberts, beginning with a brutal incident where Roberts knocked Steamboat out on the concrete floor, escalating their psychologically intense feud. Next up, Steamboat would have a feud with Randy Savage. It began when Savage attacked Steamboat and crushed his throat with the ring bell. The injury was framed as severe, taking Steamboat out of action and immediately turning the feud personal. The angle was simple, effective, and unforgettable. It led directly to their showdown at WrestleMania 3 on March 29, 1987. That night, Steamboat defeated Savage to win the Intercontinental Championship. He lost the title to the Honky Tonk Man in June 1987 and left the WWF in mid-1988, returning the Jim Crockett Promotions, which was rebranded now as WCW. Steamboat's 1989 WCW run is legendary, highlighted by his NWA World Heavyweight Championship reign and feud with Ric Flair. Their trilogy of matches set new standards for professional wrestling. On February 20th, 1989, at Chi-Town Rumble, Steamboat defeated Flair for the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Their second match, a 2 out of 3 false bout, is hailed as one of the greatest technical wrestling matches ever. In their final encounter, Flair regained the title. These matches cemented Steamboat's status as one of the best in-ring competitors ever. The Steamboat Flair trilogy of 1989 is considered one of wrestling's greatest match series, praised for storytelling and technical skill. These bouts showcase Steamboat's elite performance as both babyface and champion. They highlighted his chemistry with Flair, known for elevating opponents. Despite a short 76-day reign, Steamboat's impact as the underdog champion against Flair's arrogant persona was significant. After the trilogy, Steamboat briefly feuded with Terry Funk, who attacked Flair after the Wrestle War match. This feud, while less significant for Steamboat, kept him in top storylines. Steamboat's 1989 work was defined by technical wrestling, cardio, and athleticism. His martial arts-influenced style and in-ring psychology made his matches admissible. This run cemented his legacy as a legendary world champion and also demonstrated his unmatched ability to tell a compelling story in the ring. Steamboat had other feuds with Lex Luger, the Fabulous Freebirds, and the Enforcers before returning to the WWF in 1991. This stint, while notable, was less impactful than his first run, featuring a new theatrical persona but lacking major storylines or titles. Steamboat's 1991 WWF return saw him rebranded as the Dragon, a more theatrical character. He entered the ring in a dragon costume, breathing fire from the top rope. And like his previous run as a top contender, this stint placed him in lower to mid-card matches against enhancement talent and mid-level wrestlers. His most notable appearance was at SummerSlam 1991 in a 6-man tag team match, teaming with the Texas Tornado and the British Bulldog. They defeated the Warlord in power and glory. However, this didn't lead to more significant storylines or title opportunities. Steamboat's second run in New York was brief, ending in late 1991 due to creative frustrations. In November 1991, Steamboat made a surprise return to WCW at Clash of the Champions 17 as Dustin Rhodes' mystery partner. He immediately captured the WCW World Tag Team Championships from the Enforcers. This victory re-established Steamboat as a top competitor in WCW, contrasting sharply with his recent WWF experience and marking a new chapter in his career. Steamboat and Rhodes defended their tag titles against various teams before losing to Arn Anderson and Bobby Eaton on January 16, 1992. This brief range showcased Steamboat's tag team prowess. A notable feud during this period was with Rick Rude for the U.S. Heavyweight Championship. Their matches were praised for their psychology and storytelling, becoming a highlight of early 1990s WCW. Steamboat vied for the World Heavyweight Championship, facing stars like Vader and Flair, but couldn't secure the title. His matches, however, continued to be some of the best technical wrestling WCW had to offer. On September 1992, he won the television championship from Steve Austin, holding it for a few months before losing it back to Austin. In 1993, Steamboat partnered with Shane Douglas, winning the Unified World Tag Team Championships. They had a memorable feud with the Hollywood Blondes before dropping the titles back to them. In 1994, Steamboat reignited his legendary rivalry with Ric Flair, this time over the WCW World Heavyweight Championship. They faced each other at Spring Stampede in a match that went to a controversial double pin. The title was initially declared vacant, but Flair was later reinstated as champion. This marked one of the final major bouts between Steamboat and Flair, capping off their storied rivalry with another classic match. Steamboat's final significant appearance was winning the U.S. Heavyweight Championship from Austin at Clash of the Champions 28 in August 1994. Unfortunately, however, a serious back injury forced him to vacate the title and retire from in-ring competition later that year. Steamboat's 1991 to 1994 WCW runs amended his status as a top wrestler known for his skill, memorable feuds, and versatility in singles and tag team matches. His performances during this time left a lasting impact in WCW, despite injuries ending his career. After suffering a serious back injury in 1994 while holding the WCW United States Heavyweight Championship, Steamboat was forced to vacate the title. The injury was severe enough that he announced his retirement from active wrestling later that year. This marked the end of Steamboat's full-time in-ring career, though he would remain involved in the wrestling industry in various capacities. Steamboat made a few non-wrestling appearances during the mid-1990s, as a guest at events like WrestleMania 12. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, Steamboat worked as a trainer and agent helping develop young talent. He also worked behind the scenes in WWF's developmental system, scouting and training future stars. Between 2002 and 2003, Steamboat appeared for TNA as a special guest referee and authority figure, adding credibility to high-profile matches featuring stars like Jeff Jarrett and AJ Styles. Ricky Steamboat was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame on April 4th, 2009, the night before WrestleMania 25. His induction honored his legendary career, which included his classic matches with Ric Flair, Randy Savage, and others. Steamboat was inducted by his longtime rival and friend, Ric Flair, and his induction speech was met with much admiration and respect from both fans and peers. After his 2009 WWE Hall of Fame induction, Steamboat made a surprising in-ring comeback at WrestleMania 25. He teamed with Roddy Piper and Jimmy Snuka against Chris Jericho, impressing fans despite his long retirement. He then had a critically acclaimed singles match with Jericho at Backlash 2009, showcasing remarkable skill at 56. Steamboat's final WWE appearance was in a 10-man tag match at Extreme Rules 2010. A brain aneurysm soon after led to his permanent retirement. In November 2022, Steamboat came out of retirement for a special one-off match at Big Time Wrestling. He teamed with FTR to face Jay Lethal, Brock Anderson, and Nick Aldis. He occasionally makes guest appearances at wrestling events, signings, and conventions, where he interacts with fans and shares stories from his career. To this day, he serves as a WWE ambassador, occasionally appearing at WWE events and programs. His legacy is well respected within the company, and he often represents WWE at public events, signings, and media appearances. Well, that's it for today. If you've enjoyed this and want to get notified when the next video comes out, hit the subscribe button. That way you won't miss a thing. And if you could give a thumbs up, that would be greatly appreciated. That way YouTube will notice, send this out to others as well. Thanks for your time today, and see you real soon. Thanks for watching. Roddy Piper, affectionately known as Hot Rod, was one of the most charismatic and influential figures in professional wrestling history. Born Roderick George Doiron on April 17, 1954 in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada, Piper carved a niche for himself with his quick wit, fiery timbre, and undeniable presence. Donning a kilt and wielding bagpipes, he brought a unique blend of Scottish heritage and rebellious energy to the ring, captivating audiences around the globe. As a master of the microphone and an expert provocateur, Piper became a cornerstone of wrestling's golden era in the 1980s. Whether inciting riots as a villain or earning cheers as an anti-hero, Piper's impact went beyond the ropes. His legacy remains that of one of wrestling's all-time greats and a true pop culture icon. Welcome to Wrestling With Me, the ultimate destination for wrestling fans. Get ready to dive into high-flying action, jaw-dropping moments, and all the drama inside the squared circle. Don't forget to hit subscribe and ring the bell to stay in the loop. as we bring you the best wrestling content every time. Few names in professional wrestling evoke the same respect and nostalgia as Hot Rod Roddy Piper. Known for his in-ring charisma, razor-sharp wit, and penchant for chaos, Piper was a trailblazer who transcended the squared circle. While he was never a traditional world champion, his contributions to the industry were unparalleled, cementing his place as one of wrestling's most enduring legends. This video explores the life, career, and cultural impact of Roddy Piper, delving into what made him a cornerstone of professional wrestling history. From controversial promos to unforgettable rivalries, his influence still shapes wrestling storytelling today, worldwide legacy. Raised in a tumultuous household, Piper's youth was marked by frequent moves and strained relationships. His rebellious nature led him to leave home at an early age, finding refuge in sports and martial arts. Piper's athleticism and resilience soon guided him to professional wrestling, where he debuted at the astonishingly young age of 15. Early in his career, he performed under his real name before adopting the Roddy Piper persona. The nickname Hot Rod came later, inspired by his fiery temper and quick wit. With bagpipes in hand and a nod to his Scottish heritage, Piper began cultivating the unique persona that would eventually become iconic. By the late 1970s, Piper honed his craft across various wrestling territories, including the National Wrestling Alliance and promotions in Canada and the United States. His natural ability to connect with audiences, whether as a lovable rogue or despised villain, set him apart. Piper's gift for improvisation made him an asset to promoters seeking to ignite crowd reactions. In the early 1980s, Piper began gaining national recognition. His work in promotions like Georgia Championship Wrestling and Jim Crockett Promotions showcased his burgeoning talent. His big break came when he joined the World Wrestling Federation in 1984. One of Piper's most significant contributions was the introduction of the talk show segment Piper's Pit. Debuting in 1984, it became a groundbreaking platform for storytelling and character development in traditional wrestling promos. Piper's Pit emphasized dialogue-driven confrontations, allowing Piper to showcase his verbal dexterity and psychological mastery. One memorable moment in Piper's Pit history occurred when Piper smashed a coconut over Jimmy Superfly Snuka's head, solidifying his reputation as one of wrestling's most hated villains. These segments elevated Piper's character and laid the groundwork for countless rivalries, cementing Piper's Pit as a pivotal element of wrestling programming. Piper played a crucial role in the success of the inaugural WrestleMania in 1985. Paired with Paul Orndorff against Hulk Hogan and Mr. T, Piper was the antagonist fans loved to hate. Celebrity involvement and larger-than-life personas helped catapult WrestleMania into a global spectacle. While Piper's rivalry with Hogan defined much of the WWF's early boom period, it was his ability to draw heat and generate interest that made him invaluable. Piper didn't need championship runs to prove his importance. His mere presence guaranteed an emotional reaction from the audience. Piper's career showcased his versatility, whether as a villain inciting riots or a beloved hero standing up against injustice. His adaptability was evident in matches against Greg the Hammer Valentine, Bret Hitman Hart, and Adrian Adonis, among others. At WrestleMania 6 in 1990, Piper faced Bad News Brown. For this match, he painted half his body black to symbolize two sides of his personality. Intended as psychological mind games, the gesture was widely criticized as racially insensitive. Piper later claimed it was meant for storytelling, not offense. Piper often pushed boundaries in his promos. Some included racial or ethnic undertones that would be considered unacceptable today. For example, his feud with Mr. T leading into WrestleMania included comments interpreted as racist by fans and critics. His match against Bret Hart at WrestleMania 8 remains a standout example of Piper's technical prowess and storytelling ability. The bout showcased Piper's capacity to adapt his in-ring style, proving he was more than a charismatic talker. The blend of sportsmanship and cunning demonstrated the depth of Piper's character, leaving fans with a lasting impression. Beyond wrestling, Piper made a significant impact on popular culture. His starring role in John Carpenter's 1988 cult classic They Live introduced him to a broader audience. Piper delivered the now iconic line, "I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum." Piper's performance in They Live showcased his charisma and acting chops, earning him a place in science fiction cinema. His Hollywood foray reflected wrestlers' growing crossover appeal, paving the way for stars like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson and Dave Bautista. While Piper's career had triumphs, it also had challenges. The physical and mental toll of wrestling, coupled with personal struggles, tested his resilience. Piper's candidness about addiction and the pressures of the industry shed light on wrestling's harsh realities. Despite these struggles, Piper remained beloved among fans and peers. His willingness to mentor younger wrestlers demonstrated his enduring passion. On July 31st, 2015, Roddy Piper passed away at 61 due to cardiac arrest, leaving an irreplaceable void in the wrestling world. Piper's influence on professional wrestling is immeasurable. His ability to captivate audiences set a standard for future generations. From Piper's Pit to unforgettable rivalries, Piper redefined what it meant to be a wrestling superstar. Even after his passing, Piper's legacy endures. He was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2005, a testament to his lasting impact. Modern wrestlers often cite Piper as an inspiration, with his innovative promos serving as a blueprint for success. Roddy Piper was more than a wrestler. He was an entertainer, provocateur, and cultural icon. His ability to blur reality and fiction combined with charisma made him one of wrestling's most compelling figures. Piper's contributions ensure his legacy will resonate for generations. Roddy Piper was never just another name on a card. He was chaos with a microphone, controversy with purpose, and charisma you couldn't fake. Long after the bagpipes stopped playing, his words, moments, and confrontations still echo through modern wrestling. Few performers ever made talking the real main event, and fewer still could make audiences hate, love, and believe all at once. Piper didn't follow trends. He forced the industry to react to him. And decades later, wrestlers are still chasing the standard he set. That's the mark of a true legend. Thanks for watching. Jim Ross might look like a man who spends his weekends competitively slow-cooking ribs, but behind that Oklahoma drawl is a brain that's clocked more wrestling carnage than a Vietnam medic. And while old JR was known for screaming himself hoarse, calling everything from Mankind's plummet off hell in a cell to Stone Cold Steve Austin flipping Vince the Bird, there were some wrestlers who made him wish he'd stayed home and opened a damn diner instead. This is the story of the 5 blokes who pushed Jim Ross to the edge of sanity. The ones who made him contemplate trading his hat and headset for a loaded shotgun and a bottle of bourbon. Spoiler alert, these aren't misunderstandings. JR's dislike was about as subtle as a chainsaw through a piñata. We're talking lazy workers, egotistical maniacs, and people who made Vince McMahon look like a humanitarian. And no, Ultimate Warrior isn't on the list because even Ross would probably just have written Ultimate Effin' Nightmare and called it a day. This list goes deeper, into the truly personal grudges, backstage betrayals, and pure, unfiltered hatred. Grab a JR's BBQ sauce bottle, use it as holy water, and let's dive into the beautiful, brutal car crash that is Jim Ross's top 5. If Jim Ross had a nickel for every time Ahmed Johnson injured someone, or himself, he'd own half of Texas. To JR, Ahmed wasn't just a sloppy wrestler. He was a walking OSHA violation, wrapped in baby oil and anger issues. Signed in 1995, Ahmed looked like a superstar, jacked up, intense, charismatic. If you liked your charisma, sweaty, and confused. But when the bell rang, holy hell. Watching Ahmed work was like watching a forklift fight a trampoline. According to Jim Ross, in several shoot interviews and his Grilling JR podcast, Ahmed was dangerous and uncoachable. Ross has said on his Grilling JR podcast in 2019, you could tell Ahmed what to do, but once he got out there, it was like his brain just left the building. During a match, Ahmed once injured Davey Boy Smith by stiffing him with a clothesline so hard that somewhere physics professors cried. He later went on to injure himself slipping off the ring steps. While walking, JR allegedly lobbied backstage to either send Ahmed for retraining or just glue him to a chair until the bell rang. The backstage consensus was that Ahmed had the emotional range of a Labrador in a thunderstorm, but Ross was especially vocal. Behind closed doors, Ross basically said Ahmed was a liability lawsuit in boots. Vince McMahon, being Vince, kept pushing Ahmed because he thought he looked like money, ignoring the minor detail that Ahmed couldn't wrestle for toffee and had all the promo skills of a GPS with a low battery. It all came to a head when Ahmed started showing up late for events, openly refused to improve, and treated JR's advice the way a cat treats a glass of water. Knock it over and walk off. When Ahmed was finally released in 1998, it said that Jim Ross popped a bottle of something expensive and laughed so hard he needed oxygen. Jim Ross dealing with Buff Bagwell was like trying to explain quantum physics to a drunk seagull. After WCW folded like a cheap tent in 2001, WWE picked up some contracts, including Buff's, and within 2 weeks, JR hated Buff so much he probably considered changing his own name just so he didn't have to be associated with the man. On Grilling JR, Jim Ross explained that Buff showed up late, acted like a diva, and even got his mom involved. That's right, Judy Bagwell, the only human being who has ever been suspended above a wrestling ring on a forklift, was calling WWE headquarters to defend her boy. Ross said, "I thought it was a prank call." Nope, that was Buff's mom telling us he needed a lighter schedule. Buff had all the humility of a man who's just snorted pure ego. He thought he was a major star, ignoring the fact that WCW in 2000 was about as popular as syphilis at a swingers party. Jim Ross had to be the one to fire Buff Bagwell personally, an act he described as an absolute pleasure in his autobiography. Bagwell responded by crying backstage, saying he was too young to be treated like this, a sentence so pathetic it could cause spontaneous nosebleeds. Ross, never one for diplomacy when sufficiently pissed off, basically told Bagwell to grow a pair and handed him his pink slip. Even years later, when asked about Buff, JR simply said, he was a cancer to the locker room. And considering WWE locker rooms have featured actual criminals, that's a hell of a burn. If you ever wondered why Jim Ross sounds angry when mentioning Sable, it's because he had to babysit the world's angriest supermodel through a wrestling career she didn't even want. Sable became WWE's breakout diva in the late 90s, and with it came an ego bigger than Yokozuna's dinner tab. According to Ross, Sable treated most backstage officials like they were dog crap she'd accidentally stepped in. JR said on Grilling JR, she was hard to manage. She didn't want to be a wrestler, didn't want to be around wrestlers, but wanted to be the star of the show. When Sable filed a $110 million lawsuit against the WWE in 1999, citing unsafe working conditions, JR damn near needed a blood transfusion. He was so furious. Ross was personally involved in talent relations and described the experience of dealing with Sable's lawyers as trying to staple water to a tree. It wasn't just the lawsuit. Sable would show up late, refuse to do promos she thought were beneath her, and openly sneer at wrestling fans. You know, the people buying her bloody action figures. JR, who has the patience of a saint in most cases, once ranted, "You want to be a star? Fine. You just don't do it by shitting on the business that made you famous." When Sable finally left the WWE, before crawling back years later after Brock Lesnar defrosted her ego, Jim Ross is rumored to have said, "Good riddance," and meant it with every fiber of his cowboy-hatted being. Now, don't get it twisted. Jim Ross helped discover Brock Lesnar. He saw him suplexing trees in Minnesota and thought, there's my future megastar. But by 2004, JR wanted to suplex Brock straight into a volcano. Brock Lesnar's WWE exit was so acrimonious, it made JR physically sick. After Ross spent years pushing, coaching, babysitting, and metaphorically wiping Lesnar's oversized baby butt, Brock up and quit because he didn't like the travel schedule. Also because Vince wanted him to feud with a midget, but that's another trauma for another day. Jim Ross said, "I took it personally, I believed in Brock, I thought we were building something, and he pissed it away for nothing." Lesnar's last match in 2004 was a stinker against Goldberg that fans booed out of Madison Square Garden harder than Hulk Hogan booing a restaurant bill. Ross said Brock leaving WWE was like being stabbed with a hot poker, and in case anyone missed the sarcasm, he later added, he was more interested in playing football, and he wasn't even that bloody good at it. When Lesnar tried out for the NFL, it was reportedly Ross who laughed hardest when he failed to make the team. "Good luck playing tackle dummy," he said, probably while opening another bottle of something strong. You know what's worse than a drug-addled, arrogant, self-centered jerk? A drug-addled, arrogant, self-centered jerk who's also your top star. By 1995, Shawn Michaels was so unbearable that even Mother Teresa would have punched him square in the mouth. And Jim Ross, bless his battered soul, had to manage him. Ross said bluntly, "Shawn, during that period, was a miserable son of a bitch. Coked up, bitter, politicking harder than a Tammany Hall gang, HBK treated everyone, from jobbers to legends, like they owed him rent money." JR detailed how Michaels openly sabotaged other wrestlers' pushes, refused to lose cleanly, and turned every production meeting into a hostage negotiation. Once, when asked to put over another wrestler, Michaels allegedly responded, "Why don't we just have him pin God too?" This from a man who once literally teamed with God in a storyline. Ross admitted that while Shawn later redeemed himself, the mid-90s version was like working with a live grenade that hated your guts. One particularly brutal story: after losing his smile and vacating the WWF title, HBK handed over the belt to JR backstage with the care of a man tossing a dirty diaper at a stranger. JR supposedly bit through his own lip to keep from punching him. By the time Michaels retired the first time, Jim Ross had aged approximately 17 years. Imagine showing up to work every day knowing you had to deal with a barely literate human battering ram, a grown man crying over his mom's phone calls, a diva who thought wrestling fans were lice, a future UFC fighter with the loyalty of a fruit fly and a high as a kite diva tearing up the locker room. Jim Ross didn't just survive wrestling's ugliest backstage dramas, he thrived through them. Like a stubborn cowboy refusing to drown, he called it straight, fought his battles, and somehow didn't strangle a single idiot, a testament to either his willpower or his access to very strong whiskey. So next time you hear "Bah, God" from commentary, just remember, behind that Oklahoma drawl was a man who once took a chair shot straight to the soul 5 times and still showed up to work. Bless you, JR, you magnificent, suffering bastard. Thanks for watching. Lord Alfred Hayes, the Queen's emissary to the madhouse known as the World Wrestling Federation. A man so British, he probably wiped his feet before walking into a locker room. He showed up to WWF with the posture of a royal corgi and the voice of a man narrating tea commercials, and then proceeded to spend the next decade secretly hating half the roster. Not because they were villains, but because they were uncouth buffoons who made him question the future of the industry. Now, here's the real kicker. While Hayes looked and sounded like dignity in a tuxedo, behind the curtain he had more twisted rib stories than a barbecue joint. Ask Roddy Piper, who once wrote that Hayes approached him butt naked, swinging his junk like a hypnotist's watch and calling out, "Hot Rod," like it was foreplay. It was like watching Roy Rogers trying to lasso Dale Evans. Roddy Piper in the pit with Piper. Hayes laughed. Piper did not. In fact, young Roddy, who was just 15 when he got into the business, said the incident left him rattled enough to confront Vince McMahon about the WWF's backstage culture. And this wasn't an isolated story. Multiple sources say Hayes had a go-to prank where he'd ask rookies to close their eyes and hold out their hands, only to drop his family jewels into their palms like it was a Christmas surprise from Buckingham Palace. So yes, Lord Alfred may have loathed the cartoonish disasters prancing around him on screen, but off-screen he wasn't exactly the patron saint of professionalism. He hated stupidity. He hated sloppiness. And apparently he hazed like a fraternity reject with a Downton Abbey accent. This video isn't here to make excuses for Lord Alfred Hayes, but it is here to roast the 5 wrestlers he couldn't stand in the WWF, the ones who made him grit his teeth, tighten his cravat, and wish he was back in England teaching bad actors how to fall down gracefully. Make some noise for the Mountie, Jacques Rougeau, everybody. The only man to ever cosplay as a Canadian cop and somehow still look less intimidating than a mall security guard on Xanax. This guy walked around yelling, "I am the Mountie." Like that meant something. Dude, you're not a Mountie. You're a stripper who got lost on the way to a bachelorette party. I've seen tougher people in Sesame Street. If Canada ever needed to surrender to someone, they'd send this guy to the front lines just to confuse the enemy into a ceasefire. Jacques Rougeau had all the intensity of a guy asking if you've heard the good news about French-Canadian traffic laws. He carried a cattle prod like it was supposed to make him scary. Bro, it's not intimidating if you shock people after you've already pinned them. That's not wrestling, that's electrocuting the unconscious. Even Jeffrey Dahmer's watching like, yo, chill. And backstage, this guy had more heat than a hot yoga studio in July. Got punched out by Dynamite Kid and cried to his dad. The only time this guy won a fight was in catering when someone dropped a baguette. He wasn't a locker room leader. He was a locker room lesson, as in, don't be like that guy. Lord Alfred Hayes watched the Mountie and probably thought, this is why Canada should have stayed part of the Empire. The Mountie wasn't a heel, he was a hallucination. If stupidity wore a uniform, it'd look just like him. Red, shiny, and absolutely full of crap. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Brutus, the Barber Beefcake, the only man in wrestling history to turn a pair of scissors into a career. And I mean that literally. If it weren't for Hulk Hogan, this guy would have been cutting coupons, not hair. Brutus Beefcake looked like if Fabio fell down a flight of steroids. This man was so plastic, I thought Hasbro made him. His ring gear screamed, "I'm here to wrestle," or host an underground Chippendales show in a Florida swamp. And that mullet? Jesus. You know your haircut's a war crime when even Lord Alfred Hayes, a man who wore velvet in the summer, looked at you and said, "How uncivilized." Let's talk about the Gimmick. A barber? Really? That's not a wrestling character. That's a plan B after you fail out of beauty school. Brutus would win a match, then give his opponent an unsolicited haircut like a cracked-out Edward Scissorhands. Imagine losing to a guy who looks like he got dressed in a strip club blackout, then waking up with a fade worse than his promo skills. Backstage, the only thing Beefcake was known for was being Hogan's human fanny pack. You couldn't find him on a card without checking Hogan's waistband. Lord Alfred Hayes, a man who believed in skill and legacy, probably looked at Brutus and thought, "What's this tosser doing in the ring, other than making it dumber by standing there?" Brutus wasn't over. He was carried. By Hogan, by gimmicks, by luck. The only thing he ever cut was the credibility of the midcard. To paraphrase Lord Alfred Hayes, he couldn't wrestle his way out of a salon. Make some noise for Bad News Brown, and the only wrestler whose gimmick was being visibly pissed off that he has to be here. This guy looked like he punched mirrors before brushing his teeth. Lord Alfred Hayes couldn't stand Bad News Brown, not because he was tough, but because the guy walked around like he just got cut off in traffic for 15 straight years. Hayes was all about class, poise, storytelling. Bad News? His whole ring psychology was, what if a mosh pit had hands? And let's be clear, this wasn't just in-character heat. Bad News hated everybody. He called out Hogan for being fake, Andre for farting in his face on a bus, and the WWF for being too white, which, let's be real, he wasn't wrong about. But Hayes? Alfred was the embodiment of British restraint, and Bad News wrestled like he was trying to end polite society. Backstage, Bad News Brown acted like every conversation was a threat. The dude had more beef than a Texas barbecue. Hayes once referred to him as uncultured, which is British for, "I wouldn't invite this man to a funeral, let alone a match." Bad News was the kind of guy who'd slap your tea out of your hand just because it was chamomile. His finisher? The Ghetto Blaster, a name that aged like milk in a sauna. Alfred probably heard that and said, "Good heavens, is this a wrestling match or the soundtrack to a mugging?" The guy was so grumpy, even Lord Alfred, a man who wore cravats and gave heel commentary with manners, wanted to hit him with a thesaurus and tell him to calm the hell down. Bad News wasn't a bad guy, he was just bad company, and Alfred had no time for a man who wrestled like a felony in progress. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Nails. The only wrestler who sounded like he swallowed a cheese grater and screamed through a sock full of battery acid. This guy didn't cut promos, he left voicemails for Satan. Let's talk about the Gimmick. Vince handed us an actual criminal in a bright orange jumpsuit and said, "Trust me, he's going to be huge." And sure, he was, in mugshots. Nails looked like the guy at the bar who tells you he's not that kind of felon. He didn't wrestle, he lunged. He moved like he was trying to shank the canvas for snitching. Lord Alfred Hayes saw him and said, "Good heavens, someone call the authorities." No, the real ones. This man got into the business to play a convict and left the business because he acted like one. He actually assaulted Vince McMahon, choked him out. You know how bad you have to be at faking violence to end up committing the real thing? Nails didn't just burn bridges. He pissed on them, poured gasoline, and threatened to sue the Ashes. His run was so short, the only thing lower than his win-loss record was his SAT score. And let's not forget, his whole "I hate the big boss man" feud was built around prison abuse. That's right. Nails got on national television and yelled, "He touched me!" in a voice so distorted it made Kylo Ren sound like Liberace. To Lord Alfred Hayes, this wasn't wrestling. This was witness protection with pyros. He wasn't a monster heel. He was a walking court summons. Nails wasn't cut from the cloth. He was yanked out of the evidence locker. Give it up for Iron Mike Sharp. Canada's answer to the question, what if a broken foghorn had anxiety? This man didn't wrestle matches. He screamed through them. Every time he took a headlock, it sounded like he was being murdered in Morse code. If whining was an Olympic sport, Iron Mike would have had more gold than Kurt Angle. Lord Alfred Hayes called his matches like he was narrating a mental breakdown. You could hear the aristocratic pain in his voice every time Mike grunted like a hog caught in an electric fence. Hayes once said on commentary, "He's a bit vocal, isn't he?" Which is British for, "This man sounds like a dying goat getting a prostate exam." But wait, it wasn't just the noise. This man had heat backstage. Why? Because he refused to shower. Legitimately. For weeks. Guys were spraying deodorant like they were decontaminating a chemical spill. You didn't work a match with Iron Mike Sharp. You survived him. He wore that black forearm brace for like 15 years. Nobody ever checked it. Nobody cared. At some point, it started to smell like his career. Dead, padded, and full of excuses. He was the loudest loser in the whole of the WWF. He was the first guy who could oversell a lockup and still underdeliver a promo. Watching Sharp wrestle was like watching your drunk uncle try to get off the couch without farting. To Lord Alfred Hayes, Iron Mike wasn't a worker. He was a punishment, a cautionary tale in boots. They say jobbers don't get remembered. Mike Sharp did, but only because his stench lingered longer than his legacy. Imagine walking into the World Wrestling Federation with the poise of a royal butler and realizing you're surrounded by cartoon convicts, shrieking jobbers, pig cops, and men who use hedge clippers like diplomas. That was Lord Alfred Hayes' daily life in the WWF, a cultured, sharp-witted technician. Alfred Hayes had grace. These guys had gimmicks. Alfred had wit. They had foam props. He didn't just call matches. He narrated chaos like David Attenborough watching a zoo riot. But what made Alfred legendary wasn't his disdain. It was his restraint. In a world full of sideshows, Lord Alfred Hayes was the last ringmaster, and everybody else? They were just the animals throwing their own shit. God saved the Queen, and God helped the locker room that had to follow Lord Alfred's eye roll. Like, comment, share, subscribe. If this roast left a mark, do the right thing. Slap that like button, drop a comment, hit subscribe, and share it with someone who deserves the burn. More heat coming soon. Thanks for watching. He was the voice of a generation and the brawn of an earlier one. With a booming presence and a heart just as large, Gorilla Monsoon was one of the most beloved figures in professional wrestling history. For fans who grew up in the 1980s and early 1990s, Gorilla wasn't just an announcer, he was the announcer. He was the steady voice in the chaos, the moral compass in a world of backstabbing heels and heroic babyfaces. But before he was the voice behind the mic, Gorilla Monsoon was a rough and tough grappler, a towering force who ruled the ring in the 60s and 70s. Born Robert Morella in 1937, the man who would become Gorilla Monsoon started out in amateur wrestling and shot to prominence in the professional circuit thanks to his enormous size, nearly 400 pounds, and surprisingly agile skill set. Nicknamed the Manchurian Giant early in his career, he eventually embraced the persona of Gorilla Monsoon, a snarling, monstrous heel who dominated opponents with brute force and savage intensity. He'd eventually transitioned to beloved color commentator and backstage authority, partnering with the likes of Bobby the Brain Heenan and Jesse the Body Ventura. But don't let the warm chuckles and lighthearted banter fool you. Gorilla Monsoon had seen it all behind the curtain. As an executive in the World Wrestling Federation and right-hand man to Vince McMahon Sr. and later Jr., Monsoon had pull and opinions. He was widely respected, if not feared, in the locker room, not because he was cruel or cutthroat, but because Monsoon didn't play games. He had a no-nonsense approach to business, a soft spot for old-school values, and a distinct intolerance for ego-driven drama. While Monsoon could be patient and mentoring to many, there were a few wrestlers he just couldn't stand working with. Whether it was their attitude, their style, or their complete disregard for locker room etiquette, these men got on Gorilla's bad side, and it showed. Let's pull back the curtain and explore the fascinating, lesser-known side of Gorilla Monsoon, the part of him that could make or break your career, especially if you rubbed him the wrong way. Gorilla Monsoon had the patience of a saint when it came to rookies, but even he had limits, and the Ultimate Warrior tested every one of them. There was no doubt Warrior had the it factor, a chiseled physique, unbridled energy, and a look that screamed main event superstar. Vince McMahon loved him, fans adored him. But backstage, he was a walking tornado of ego, bad timing, and chaos. Monsoon, who by the late 1980s was doing more backstage work and commentary than wrestling, found Warrior's unpredictable nature infuriating. Warrior was notorious for blowing off agent instructions, forgetting spots, and endangering other wrestlers with his reckless in-ring behavior. Worse still, he had no grasp of the unspoken locker room hierarchy, and that didn't sit well with Gorilla. According to former WWE producer Bruce Pritchard, Monsoon once said, Warrior wasn't just green, he was neon. Gorilla had little time for wrestlers who didn't respect the craft, and Warrior's meteoric rise, fueled more by charisma than skill, seemed to embody everything Monsoon disliked about the changing industry. Their backstage confrontations weren't exactly explosive, but there was a visible frost in Gorilla's demeanor whenever Warrior was mentioned on commentary. Monsoon would praise his strength, but often mask subtle digs within his classic phrases like, "This guy doesn't have a clue where he is," or "What a miscarriage of justice." Nails was involved in one of the most notorious behind-the-scenes incidents in wrestling history, a real-life assault on Vince McMahon in 1992 over a pay dispute. Gorilla Monsoon, who was not only close to Vince Sr. but fiercely loyal to the company, took the incident personally. Monsoon was reportedly in the building when Nails attacked Vince and had to be physically restrained by other personnel from going after the former prison guard Gimmick himself. Monsoon didn't care if Nails felt wronged. He saw the attack as disgraceful and unprofessional. In later interviews, Monsoon would never explicitly mention Nails, but those close to him, including wrestlers like Jim Ross and Pat Patterson, confirmed Monsoon considered him scum and blacklisted him from any future bookings. Gorilla didn't just dislike Nails, he detested him. Once you crossed that kind of line, there was no redemption in Monsoon's eyes. At one point, Monsoon had great respect for Hossein Khosrow Ali Vaziri, better known as the Iron Sheik. A legitimate Olympic-level grappler and gifted heel, Sheik had carved out a special place for himself in the industry. But as the years went on, his erratic behavior, substance issues, and explosive temper wore thin on Gorilla's patience. Monsoon was part of the brass that had to deal with Sheik's erratic no-shows and drunken outbursts in the mid-1980s. There were times Sheik would arrive at events barely coherent, or get into heated arguments with other wrestlers backstage. What really irked Gorilla was the sense that Sheik was throwing away his potential. Monsoon believed in respecting the business and taking care of your opponents. Watching Sheik decline from a world-class heel to a walking liability was, to him, a betrayal of everything they had once stood for. Though never publicly hostile, Monsoon would often refer to Sheik as unpredictable in all the wrong ways during commentary and backstage meetings. Their professional relationship eventually dissolved into a begrudging tolerance at best. This one might come as a surprise. Special Delivery Jones and Gorilla Monsoon were actually friends outside the ring, and their careers overlapped in the 1970s and 80s, but sometimes even a friend can drive you up the wall. SD Jones was a beloved babyface and enhancement talent, known for his bright smile and colorful personality, but Monsoon reportedly grew frustrated with SD's laid-back approach to in-ring psychology and preparation. He wasn't lazy, just inconsistent. Jones had a tendency to ad-lib or veer from planned match structures, which could throw off timing and confuse opponents. Monsoon, who believed in crisp execution and professionalism, often had to clean up the mess on commentary or backstage in production meetings. While it never turned into an open feud, Monsoon once told a young agent, SD never met a spot he couldn't forget. Bad News Brown was a genuine tough guy with Olympic judo credentials and a chip on his shoulder the size of Brooklyn. Monsoon respected Brown's legit background, but their philosophies on the business couldn't have been more different. Brown famously refused to sell for certain wrestlers or do jobs he didn't agree with. He saw pro wrestling less as entertainment and more as a survival contest. That lone wolf attitude made him difficult to book, and difficult for Monsoon to manage. Monsoon believed in putting the show first. Do business, get paid, get out, was the old school mantra. Bad News Brown saw it differently. If he felt he was being disrespected, he'd walk. Or worse, he'd shoot. The tension between the two peaked in the late 80s during Brown's short-lived main event push. Gorilla, by then deeply involved in production, reportedly vetoed several storyline pitches involving Brown due to his unwillingness to cooperate with others. He told one producer, "I won't waste airtime on a guy who won't play ball." What's clear in all these stories isn't that Gorilla Monsoon was some grumpy old gatekeeper clinging to the past. It's that he believed in respect. Respect for the business, respect for your fellow workers, respect for the fans. The men who got under his skin most weren't necessarily the worst wrestlers, but the ones who dismissed that code of honor. Monsoon wasn't petty. He didn't hold grudges for no reason. If you came to work, did your job, and cared about the product, Gorilla would have your back. But if you were sloppy, arrogant, or made a mockery of the craft, you'd feel the cold shoulder of one of the most powerful voices in the company. It's worth noting that Monsoon also mentored dozens of stars, many of whom went on to become legends. Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, Randy Savage, they all had Monsoon's respect because they respected the business. Even Bobby Heenan, his longtime commentary foil, once said, "Gorilla would rib you, bury you on commentary, and then buy you dinner after the show, if you were one of the boys. But if you weren't, he made it clear." Gorilla Monsoon passed away in 1999, leaving behind a legacy that stretched from the ring to the broadcast booth to the boardroom. His voice is immortal, his presence still felt. But perhaps his greatest legacy lies in the standards he upheld. Wrestling was real to Gorilla, not in the break kayfabe sense, but in the sense that it mattered. The passion, the performance, the professionalism, it mattered. And if you didn't treat it with the same reverence, Gorilla Monsoon would let you know. With just a look, a sigh, or maybe a classic one-liner. Give me a break, will ya? Well, that's all we've got time for today, and a big thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and make sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any of our future content. See you in the next video. In the world of professional wrestling, there were titans in the ring, icons on the microphone, and legends that defined an era. But there was only one man who stood between chaos and control. One voice that brought order to the madness. He wasn't throwing punches, but he was landing every word with precision. He was the master of the microphone, the backbone of every unforgettable promo, the man who could make you believe every word, no matter how outrageous. He was Mean Gene Okerlund. Tonight, we take a look at the life and legacy of the greatest interviewer in wrestling history. The man behind the mic, the voice of generations, Mean Gene. Welcome all to another heated debate where we settle once and for all the legacy of one of wrestling's most iconic figures, the incomparable Mean Gene Okerlund.
Incomparable? Simon, I compare him to my Uncle Roy, and let me tell you, Uncle Roy once announced bingo night at the VFW Hall with more enthusiasm than Mean Gene ever had.
Oh, would you stop? We're talking about the voice of an era. Mean Gene Okerlund was more than an announcer. He was the soul of professional wrestling journalism, a master of the microphone, and the man who could hold his own against the biggest personalities in the business.
Journalism? Please! That guy stirred up more drama than a cage match between two angry ex-wives. I mean, if you gave Mean Gene a microphone, he was either setting up a confrontation, blowing the roof off an arena, or asking Hulk Hogan for the 100th time, "What you gonna do?"
That's exactly why he was great. But before he was the most recognizable voice in wrestling, he was honing his craft in the American Wrestling Association, the AWA. That's where Mean Gene built his reputation as one of the best in the business.
Oh sure, the AWA, the land of forgotten dreams. Remind me, what was their claim to fame again? Besides being the best feeder system Vince McMahon ever had?
Have some respect. The AWA was one of the premier wrestling promotions in the country, and Mean Gene was a crucial part of it. He started as a radio guy in Minneapolis before getting a shot with Vern Gagne's promotion in the early 70s. He wasn't just another face behind the mic, he became the trusted voice of the AWA.
So what you're saying is, he went from spinning polka records to calling wrestling matches? That's like going from being a waiter to running a 5-star restaurant.
Exactly. And he made it work. At first, he was just a backup announcer, filling in when necessary. But when Marty O'Neill, the AWA's original announcer, started stepping away from the business, Mean Gene took over, and guess what? The transition was seamless. His ability to connect with wrestlers and fans made him stand out immediately.
Yeah, because nothing screams future Hall of Famer like filling in for a guy who wanted to retire.
You don't get it. Gene had this natural ability to make interviews feel important. He wasn't just asking questions, he was elevating the talent. When Bobby Heenan was in the AWA managing guys like Nick Bockwinkel and Ray Stevens, Mean Gene was right there, giving those interviews an extra spark.
Oh, now I get it. Mean Gene was the guy who made sure Bockwinkel's 15-minute speeches didn't put the audience to sleep. Bravo!
He did more than that. The AWA was filled with some of the greatest talkers in the business. Heenan, Bockwinkel, Jesse Ventura, Mad Dog Vachon, and Gene kept up with all of them. He was the glue that held those promos together. He even got in on the action a few times himself.
Oh, let me guess. He put on a pair of trunks and wrestled Vern Gagne in a 60-minute Iron Man match?
Not quite, but he did have a match. In 1983, Mean Gene actually teamed up with Hulk Hogan against Mr. Fuji and George the Animal Steele in the AWA. It was a spectacle. The crowd loved it because they respected Mean Gene. They saw him as part of the show, not just some faceless announcer.
Oh, great. So now we're pretending Mean Gene was a top draw? Next, you'll tell me he was responsible for Hogan's rise to superstardom.
In a way, he was. When Hulk Hogan first exploded in the AWA, Mean Gene was the guy who made his promos sound larger than life. He gave them legitimacy. And when Hogan left for the WWF, guess who followed? Mean Gene. Vince McMahon knew that if he wanted to make his national expansion work, he needed the best interviewer in the game.
So you're saying Vince McMahon looked at Mean Gene and said, "That's the missing piece to my empire"?
I'm saying Mean Gene was a key part of the puzzle. When the WWF took off in the 1980s, it wasn't just the wrestlers who made it happen. It was the entire presentation. And Mean Gene, with his professionalism and charisma, was an essential part of that presentation. Without him, wrestling interviews wouldn't have been the same.
All right, I'll admit, he had a presence. And yeah, Maybe without him, some of those classic AWA promos wouldn't have hit the same. But let's not pretend he was out there taking bumps every night.
He didn't need to. He took verbal bumps. He got berated by Mad Dog Vachon, talked circles around Heenan, and kept a straight face through some of the wildest interviews in history. And that's why, when Vince McMahon came calling, it was a no-brainer for Mean Gene to jump ship. The WWF needed a voice that could bring credibility to the madness.
And what a madness it was. But I'll say this. Mean Gene took what he learned in the AWA and made himself a legend in the WWF. Even I can't argue that. But let's face it, if he had stayed in the AWA, we wouldn't be talking about him right now.
That's true, but that's because the wrestling business was changing. The AWA didn't evolve, and Mean Gene knew he had to go where the future was. But let's not forget, he made his name in the AWA first. That's where he earned his reputation as the best in the business, and that's why Vince McMahon wanted him in the WWF. Mean Gene wasn't just another announcer, he was the announcer. And it all started before he ever stepped foot in a WWF ring.
Fine. I'll give him his due. But if we start talking about Lord Alfred Hayes next, I'm out of here.
When Mean Gene debuted in the WWF in 1984, it was like wrestling got a voice upgrade overnight. Suddenly, every promo had more polish, every interview had more energy, and every big moment felt even bigger.
Oh sure, because the wrestlers weren't already screaming their lungs out, right?
It's not about volume, it's about delivery. Mean Gene knew how to guide interviews, when to ask the right questions, and when to let the talent shine. He had legendary chemistry with guys like Hulk Hogan, Randy Savage, and The Ultimate Warrior.
Oh yeah, those Warrior interviews were something else. Well, Mean Gene, the spaceship has landed, the gods have spoken, and the stars are aligning in the galactic sun. And Mean Gene just nodded along like that made any sense.
That's because he was a pro. He kept things grounded so the audience could actually stay engaged. And let's not forget, he was the master of reaction shots. A raised eyebrow, a skeptical glance. Mean Gene could say more with a single look than some announcers could in an entire promo.
I'll give you that. His expressions during those Jake Roberts and Ric Flair promos were priceless.
Exactly. And he wasn't just a backstage interviewer, he was an on-screen personality. He hosted Primetime Wrestling, All-American Wrestling, and countless event countdowns. His presence was just as crucial to WWF's production as the wrestlers themselves.
And who could forget his bloopers? Like when the sign fell behind him during SummerSlam '89 and he blurted out an expletive on live TV.
And fans loved him for it. Because Mean Gene wasn't just a character, he was real. That's why, when he did those legendary Event Center updates, people paid attention. They trusted Mean Gene.
All right, I'll admit it. The guy was one of a kind.
More than that, he was the best ever to do it. Mean Gene Okerlund wasn't just an announcer, he was a part of wrestling history.
Fine, you win this round. But if we debate Tony Schiavone next, I'm bringing a folding chair.
But nothing lasts forever, and by the mid-1990s, Mean Gene's time in the WWF was winding down. The business was changing, and when WCW started throwing big money at top talent, Mean Gene made the jump in 1993.
Oh, and let me guess. WCW thought signing an announcer would turn the tide in the Monday Night Wars?
He was more than an announcer. Mean Gene brought legitimacy. WCW was trying to compete with the WWF, and they needed familiar faces. Having him conduct interviews with guys like Ric Flair, Sting, and the NWO gave the product an extra layer of credibility.
Yeah, because nothing says credibility like him constantly plugging that WCW hotline.
Okay, so maybe he did a little extra promoting. But his presence in WCW helped them during their rise to dominance in the late 90s. And when wrestling started declining in the early 2000s, he made his way back home to WWE.
Oh yeah, right back into the nostalgia section.
And why not? WWE knew fans loved Mean Gene. They brought him back for special events, nostalgia interviews, and even made him a Hall of Famer in 2006. His induction speech was one of the best ever.
Yeah, because nobody could tell stories like Mean Gene.
Exactly. Even in retirement, he never stopped being part of the wrestling family. Whether it was hosting WWE specials, appearing in video games, or giving interviews, Mean Gene was always in demand. Right up until his passing in 2019, he remained the beloved voice of an entire generation. On January 2nd, 2019, the wrestling world lost one of its most legendary voices when Mean Gene Okerlund passed away at the age of 76. His death marked the end of an era, as fans and wrestlers alike mourned the loss of a man who had given so much to the business. WWE honored him with a touching tribute, with Hulk Hogan delivering an emotional eulogy on Raw. Tributes poured in from all corners of the industry, from Ric Flair to Steve Austin, all recognizing that there would never be another Mean Gene. Even in death, his legacy remains alive, as his work continues to be celebrated by wrestling fans old and new. So, what's the final verdict on Mean Gene Okerlund?
I'll tell you what it is. He was overrated. There, I said it. All he did was hold a microphone while wrestlers yelled at him.
That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. Mean Gene wasn't just holding a microphone, he was creating magic. His voice, his professionalism, his ability to make every interview feel like a major event. No one did it better.
All right, fine, he had a good run. But was he really that important?
Are you kidding me? Without Mean Gene, wrestling interviews would have been a mess of incoherent screaming. He gave order to chaos, structure to insanity, and he made fans believe in the larger-than-life personas of the superstars.
I suppose you've got a point. He did have some legendary moments.
Exactly. Whether it was calling out Ric Flair's antics, keeping a straight face while the Ultimate Warrior rambled about the cosmos, or standing beside Hulk Hogan during some of wrestling's most iconic promos, Mean Gene Okerlund was irreplaceable.
All right, I'll give it to you. The guy was a legend. Happy now?
Ecstatic. And now I think it's time we toast to the man himself. Here's to Mean Gene Okerlund, the greatest interviewer in the history of professional wrestling. Well, that's all for today, folks. Join us next time as we debate another legend of the squared circle.
And until then, have a great day.
He could sing, fly, and outwork half the roster. But they handed him feathers and a smile, and called it a gimmick. Koko B. Ware wasn't just another mid-carder. He was the spark that lit up every card he touched. Crowds popped before his music even hit. And what did he get for it? A damn parrot. In a locker room full of egos and politics, Koko stood out, not just because of the bright gear, but because he had actual presence. Real charisma, he could go. But in the 80s, charisma without clout meant you danced for the boss's amusement. Promoters saw him as entertainment, not competition, and that label stuck to him like glue. While others got title runs, Koko got gimmicks and scraps. He was the man who made everyone else look good and got laughed at for it. This is the truth about Koko B. Ware. The high flyer they caged, and the respect he never got back. James Ware was born in Union City, Tennessee in 1957, a small town with big mouths and bigger dreams. From the start, Koko wasn't built like a heavyweight, but he was quick, cocky, and carried himself like one. He grew up loving two things, music and sports. And that rhythm, that swagger, you'd see it later when he danced to the ring with that massive grin. He didn't come from privilege. He came from hard work. His father died young, and Koko spent most of his youth trying to hold his family together. But when he found wrestling on TV, it hit him like a lightning bolt. He saw flash, power, color, and a way out. He started training in the late 70s under Herb Welch, one of the old-school Tennessee shooters who didn't hand out respect easily. Koko earned it the hard way, taking bumps in barns, armories, and broken-down gyms across the South. Early on, he went by Sweet Brown Sugar, teaming with Bobby Eaton before Eaton's Midnight Express days. They tore up the Memphis territory, fast, young, and stealing shows. But it was the Memphis system that also taught him something harsh. You could be over with the crowd and still be stuck in the middle. No matter how loud the cheers got, the promoter still saw color before talent. Koko had the voice of a star, the look of one too, but the business he was walking into wasn't ready for a black man to sing, fly, and win all in the same night. The foundation was laid. The talent was real. The ceiling? Already built above him. By the early 80s, Koko B. Ware was done playing small time. He'd paid his dues in the southern circuits, bruised, underpaid, and overlooked, and he wanted out of the shadow of Memphis. His first real spotlight came in Continental Wrestling Association under Jerry Jarrett. That territory was a shark tank. Guys like Jerry Lawler and Bill Dundee ran it like their personal playgrounds. If you weren't in their circle, you were just another name on the card. But Koko? He forced his way in. He had too much natural flash to be ignored. Crowds in Tennessee loved him, especially as Sweet Brown Sugar. He had the high-flying offense before high flyer was even a category. That drop kick alone could have had its own theme song. He started teaming with Norville Austin, and that pairing made history. Two black stars working heel in the South and getting over. That wasn't supposed to happen. They drew heat for real, from fans and promoters. The kind of heat that comes with racial slurs shouted from the crowd while you're trying to perform. By 1983, he jumped to Mid-South, where Ernie Ladd vouched for him. That helped, but it didn't change the game. He still wasn't getting main event money. He was still the guy who could make the babyface look good. Koko had charisma that could have carried a belt, but he wasn't allowed to carry much more than a gimmick. Every night, he went out there and stole the show, and every morning, the pay envelope reminded him he was still replaceable. He wasn't bitter yet, but you could see it building. Behind that smile, under that dance. Koko B. Ware was getting tired of playing nice. Koko B. Ware didn't cut promos, he performed them. Every word had rhythm, every pause hit the crowd. He didn't need gimmicks to get heat, but management gave him one anyway. His natural charisma made him stand out in every locker room he entered. Other wrestlers respected him. He could carry a match, hype a crowd, and elevate less experienced performers. Fans noticed, promoters didn't. When he signed with WWF in 1986, the platform was huge. National TV, big arenas, finally a chance to prove himself. Instead, he got Frankie the Parrot, flashy outfits, and a gimmick that turned talent into novelty. Wins were scarce. Finishes went to others. Koko became a tool to make other stars look strong, while the crowd loved him anyway. In the ring, he shined. He faced Nikolai Volkov, Harley Race, and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Every match showed his timing, athleticism, and charisma. Backstage, he was respected, even admired for work ethic and talent. But management kept the ceiling low. His influence extended beyond WWF. Future high flyers like Too Cold Scorpio, R-Truth, and Kofi Kingston inherited his style. Energetic, crowd-hyping, and fast-paced. Koko had perfected it years before it became trendworthy. Even under the Parrot gimmick and office politics, he commanded attention. Fans were with him, promoters weren't. Koko had the tools of a top star, timing, charisma, and in-ring skill. The WWF just didn't know what to do with them. And yet, every entrance, every promo, every match reminded the world of one truth. Talent can't be hidden forever, even when it's trapped under feathers. Koko B. Ware never got the main event he deserved. Vince McMahon loved his crowd reaction, but not his talent. They put a damn parrot on his shoulder instead of a belt. Welcome to the Birdman trap. In Memphis, he feuded with Jerry Lawler. Lawler got the title. Koko got the heat. Every time he went against Bill Dundee or Butch Reed, he tore the house down. Fans cheered, promoters shrugged. Wins? Rare. Recognition? Scarce. Jump to the WWF in 1986. He faced Nikolai Volkov, Harley Race, and Greg the Hammer Valentine. Crowd pops? Massive? Finishes? Always for someone else. Even the Honky Tonk Man was just Koko elevating a heel. He was the guy making everyone look good, like a backup dancer who keeps stealing the show. The creative ceiling was crystal clear. Fans loved him, but management didn't. Main event? Forget it. Tag teams were the same joke. Owen Hart, the Bushwhackers, all fun, all secondary. Comedy beats skill, and WWF loved that. Every feud, every program, every storyline, a lesson in how to use talent while pretending you're giving a damn. Koko had the moves, the energy, the fire. They had the parrot, the punchline, the ceiling. Fans cheered. Promoters laughed behind his back. The Birdman elevated everyone and got nothing back. That's the truth. The WWF didn't bury him because he sucked. They buried him because they could. After WWF, Koko B. Ware didn't vanish. He hit the independents, smaller territories, and special appearances, still dancing, still hyping crowds, still proving he could outwork anyone in the room. But the game had moved on. Promoters still didn't hand him the spotlight he earned. Outside the ring, Koko's attitude was pure. He never bitched publicly. He never burned bridges. He let his work speak, even when the company tried to bury him with gimmicks and mid-card ceilings. Respect from peers? Maxed out? Recognition from promoters? Minimal. He's remembered as a pioneer in high-energy crowd-hyping style, a performer who demanded attention without ever demanding it from the office. The Birdman elevated everyone he worked with, and fans knew it. Koko's legacy is twofold. One, the energy and style that inspired a generation of performers. Two, the cautionary tale of a man whose talent exceeded the opportunities he was given. In the end, Koko B. Ware didn't just survive the system. He outshined it, one dance, one dropkick, one over-the-top pop at a time. Koko B. Ware didn't get the main events, the belts, or the respect he earned. He got feathers, a parrot, and a mid-card ceiling. But the fans saw the truth. Every dropkick, every dance, every hype-filled promo screamed talent the office refused to reward. He influenced the next generation, carried the crowd, and proved that skill and charisma can't be buried forever. The Birdman outshone the system. They tried to hold him down, but he soared anyway, and that's why we'll never forget him. If you enjoyed the Birdman's story, smash that like button. Hit subscribe or risk missing more backstage truths they don't want you to see. Bell notifications? Turn them on. We're diving deep, exposing the real wrestling heat, and trust me, you don't want to be left out. Thanks for watching. John Nord walked into every locker room like he owned it, and for some guys, that was a problem. He wasn't a gimmick guy. He didn't care about selling merch or hugging every fan. He cared about two things: respect and power. Cross him and you felt it, sometimes in the ring, sometimes behind closed doors. This isn't a story about a guy who got into fake fights for TV. This is about real heat. The kind of heat that leaves bruises. The kind of heat that makes promoters and co-workers think twice before starting something stupid. Nord didn't pick many enemies. He didn't need to. But the ones he had, they left a mark. On him, on them, and on anyone who watched it happen. Today, we're counting down the only verified people John Nord truly hated. No myths, no kayfabe, no made-up fifth guy to pad the runtime. Just raw, documented animosity. The stuff wrestling doesn't want you to hear. John Eric Nord was born in 1959 in St. Cloud, Minnesota. Big kid, bigger ambitions. He started in amateur wrestling, grinding his way through the mat game before realizing the pro scene paid better. By the early 1980s, Nord was stepping into regional promotions, and people noticed. At 6'6" and over 280 pounds, he wasn't just a big man, he was a walking threat. He had the athleticism to back it up, and he wasn't afraid to take real punishment to make a match feel legit. The Berserker persona came next. Nord didn't need flashy gimmicks or goofy costumes. He relied on intimidation, presence, and the knowledge that when he threw a punch, it mattered. Fans might have seen a character. Backstage, they saw a guy who didn't take shit. Nord worked Mid-South, AWA, and had a brief WWF stint. Everywhere he went, his reputation grew. Reliable, stiff, and unpredictable. You knew he could carry a program, but you also knew he wouldn't hesitate if someone rubbed him the wrong way. He wasn't the locker room whisperer or the backstage politician. He didn't play favorites, and he didn't pretend to like anyone he didn't. Respect him or get out of the way. That attitude shaped his career as much as his in-ring work. By the time Nord hit the big promotions, he was a recognizable figure. Not for championship reigns, not for charisma, but for being a legitimate force of nature in the ring and a guy you didn't want to cross backstage. The Berserker wasn't a top-tier promo machine, but he made his presence felt on TV. Every feud he stepped into had that looming threat. A big man who could swing a punch and sell a slam like it mattered. He wasn't here for small talk. He was a Viking Storm in the WWF mid-card, loud, violent, and built to terrify. And when he stepped into the ring, the guys across from him knew it wasn't going to be easy. Davey Boy Smith was one of his first major tests. The contrast couldn't have been starker. The Berserker's wild, swinging Viking chaos versus Smith's brute strength and technical precision. Their televised bouts had tension dripping off the ropes, every slam landing with real weight. Nord's unpredictability made Smith respect him, or at least respect the potential for disaster in the ring. Then came The Undertaker during his 1991 run. The WWF pushed this as a dark, menacing angle. Berserker with a sword, Undertaker looming like death incarnate. On TV, it was a spectacle. But Nord leaned into the character fully. Stiff strikes, wild attacks, and a presence that made every segment feel dangerous. And let's not forget the Bret Hart WWF Championship Challenge in November 1991. The Berserker stepped into the main event spotlight, testing himself against a top-tier technician. It wasn't a long feud, but it was high-profile, televised, and validated Nord as more than just a mid-card brute. He could hang with the best, at least for a night. In short, these are the Berserker's real on-screen rivalries: Davey Boy Smith, The Undertaker, Jimmy Snuka, and Bret Hart. Big names, heavy stakes, televised tension, not backstage whispers. TV fights that showed the Berserker wasn't just a gimmick, he was a legitimate mid-card menace who left an impression every time the bell rang. Nord wasn't the type to sugarcoat anything. And Vern Gagne? He ran AWA like an icy dictator, doling out money and respect with a miser's hand. Nord quickly saw the pattern: deliver, carry programs, take bumps. But the pay didn't match the work. Nord respected skill, but Vern's system tested patience. Other wrestlers whispered in the locker room. Nord just gritted his teeth. He didn't beg, he didn't whine. He made it known quietly. He knew his value, and he expected it to be recognized. Vern demanded precision, control, technical perfection. Nord was stiff, heavy, unpredictable. That rubbed Vern the wrong way. Accounts from former AWA talent confirmed Nord often challenged booking decisions and quietly argued over money. Not personal hate, principle. He wanted what was promised, not a pat on the back. Backstage tension simmered like a slow-burning fuse. Nord's blunt force clashed with Verne's calculated coldness. He didn't explode, but his presence alone was a warning. Push him too far, and consequences followed. Other wrestlers respected that balance. Polite enough to survive, ruthless enough to be feared. It wasn't a classic shoot feud with punches thrown, but the professional friction was real. Nord exposed cracks in Verne's system, showing that even the Cold King couldn't freeze someone who knew his worth. In AWA, that made him valuable, dangerous, and unforgettable. Nord and Butch Reed didn't just dislike each other, they hated each other. This wasn't kayfabe, this wasn't a storyline you could ignore. Backstage in Mid-South, tensions were constant. Reed had an ego the size of a football field, and Nord? He didn't suffer egos lightly. From the first match, Reed thought he was untouchable. Nord saw it immediately and pushed back. Not verbally, physically, in-ring, in every drill, every bump. Reports confirm matches were stiff, competitive, and no one got the easy ride. Nord never held back. Reed didn't like that. Simple. Their clashes weren't scripted arguments. It was pure collision. Slaps, stiff shots, big swings. Everything in the ring felt dangerous. Other wrestlers watched and sometimes stepped in, but mostly they let it happen. It was Nord's method: assert dominance, enforce respect, and make it clear that no one walks over him, not even Reed. Reed tried to command the locker room, throwing around influence, but Nord ignored it. Money disputes? Booking favors? Not an issue. Nord didn't need validation, he needed respect, and Reed wasn't handing it out. Every encounter was a lesson. You take Nord lightly, you get burned. The tension didn't stay in the ring. At one point, Nord and Reed exploded backstage. This wasn't a slap or a shove. It was a full-blown physical confrontation, punches thrown, chairs nearly involved. Other wrestlers had to step in to separate them. That fight cemented their feud as legendary shoot-level heat. A reminder that Nord didn't bluff, and Reed learned quickly that ego only gets you so far when you collide with a man who refuses to be disrespected. This feud wasn't about storylines or TV exposure. It was raw, documented, and backed by multiple sources. Nord's intensity, his unpredictability, and Reed's inflated ego created a combustible mix. House shows, Mid-South tapings, and practice drills all carried this tension. Fans never saw it, but the heat backstage was palpable. In short, Reed and Nord didn't just clash, they collided. One wanted respect without earning it, the other demanded it. That's why their backstage heat is legendary, brutal, and unforgettable. Nord wasn't a man you forgot. In the ring, he was chaos wrapped in muscle. Backstage, he demanded respect. From Verne's cold calculations to Reed's raging ego, he left a trail of bruised egos and documented shoot-level heat. Not everyone liked him, but everyone respected him. He never bowed, never begged, never took shortcuts. That's why his legacy isn't just in televised matches. It's in the real-life battles, the grudges, the fights that fans never saw but every wrestler backstage remembers. Nord walked through wrestling like a storm, and stayed untamed. Smash that like button if you respect real wrestling heat. Hit subscribe for more behind-the-scenes chaos, backstage grudges, and untamed wrestling legends. Don't miss the next video. More shoot stories, more brutal truths, and more men who refuse to be pushed around. Stay savage, stay tuned. Thanks for watching.